The man elegantly took the woman's hand in a snow-white glove to give it a tender kiss. The girl with stunning violet eyes blushed in embarrassment. She could no longer imagine her life without him. The guy was incredibly handsome, like a fairy tale prince who stepped out of the pages of a magical story. Opening his eyes, he admitted that he had been nervous about his new assignment, but her presence enveloped him in calm and filled him with confidence. Together they walked down the snow-white corridor, full of bright radiance, hoping that only a bright and happy future awaited them ahead. The door slowly opened, and a blinding light streamed from behind it. The sacred virgin bowed before the emperor, who sat majestically on his throne in a room where luxury and gold glittered everywhere. It was this lady who had the power to change the fate of the monster cursed by the inexorable sand rain. From the window, two creatures secretly watched the meeting, a wolf boy and a small rabbit. The healer will smile with warmth and confidence. Her magic will be aimed at healing and saving all magical creatures. An ordinary girl in casual clothes gently knelt down in front of the cage with her dog, her faithful pet named Mahu. The dog had soft white fur, a black nose, and looked quite contented, radiating calm and comfort. The first-year student hugged the dog tenderly, holding it close to her like it was her only family. Her name was Futaba Ichiru, and she was also 25 years old. While talking to the dog, Ichiru complained to her faithful friend about the difficulties of the work she had to do to earn a living. To support his owner, the pet began to lick her nose, and this caused the girl to laugh joyfully. The next day, with a sad expression on her face, the freshman listened to the instructions of her superiors, trying to cope with another difficult task and find the strength to complete the work. Other employees were already hard at work at their computers, racing to complete the work before the deadline. At the suggestion of the boss, Ichiru glanced at her colleagues and became even more upset. They looked far from cheerful. When the day off came, the freshman lay on her bed, completely exhausted with a headache. Every movement brought only discomfort. Approaching Mahu, the girl, with trembling in her heart, sought comfort in his presence, hoping to receive a sincere charge of tenderness and cheerfulness from the puppy. However, the dog, who should have woken up by now, lay motionless on the pillow, not making a sound. This made Ichiru afraid for her pet's health, and she immediately started searching for the nearest veterinary clinic on the internet. Suddenly, the phone rang. The boss started demanding that Futaba report to work immediately because of the accumulated backlog. The girl awkwardly apologized and explained that she couldn't come to work because of her sick puppy. In response, she received a stern reprimand from her boss. As if hearing his mistress, the dog woke up and looked sadly at her with his big, sad eyes. Not wanting to see its owner sad, the animal stood up on its paws and, taking uncertain but swift steps, ran up to her to console her. Immediately, hearing the barking on the phone, the boss began yelling at Ichiru, saying that she simply wanted to take a day off and that the pet was in fact completely healthy. The boss didn't let her subordinate get a word in edgewise, furiously accusing her of selfishness and declaring that she had no place on their team. Futaba had no choice but to come to work and leave the dog at home. Her feminine fingers quickly ran over the keys of the keyboard, typing the text of the message. She only went home late at night, thinking on the way about the possibility of changing her job to something else, more suitable and less stressful. In the darkness, when the night enveloped the world with a soft blanket, the girl carefully approached the cage where little Mahu was sleeping comfortably. But when Ichiru touched him, she felt that he was cold and not breathing. Big tears started to flow from Futaba's eyes as she realized that something had been wrong with the puppy since the morning. Clutching her pet's body, she cried and called herself a fool, guilty of the death of her best friend. Suddenly her legs gave way and the girl fell to the floor, losing consciousness from exhaustion and stress. Her body went limp and sleep gently enveloped her, absorbing her into its deep and soothing embrace. A beautiful girl with brown hair and violet eyes looked out the open window in surprise. It seemed like she had returned to her past life. The green dress fluttered in the wind as Ichiru tried to figure out who had given her this new chance at life. Now the former first-year student was a nameless orphan of 15 years old. Although her character and personality traits remained the same, her appearance had changed dramatically. In this world, there existed the Aurelian Empire, a powerful country that rejected war and amazed with its grandeur and inimitable grace. The stray was taken in by a local orphanage, which provided her with temporary housing and education. However, when Ichiru turned 15, she was expelled. A friend from the orphanage offered the orphan to go with her to a new place, but was refused. Ichiru was determined to achieve everything on her own, even though she couldn't clearly articulate her dream. In the big city, in addition to people, there were also magical creatures who possessed supernatural powers and knew how to use magic. People and magical creatures coexisted peacefully with each other, in complete harmony and mutual understanding, communicating in the same language. A cute little animal with fluffy fur and a horn on its forehead, carrying a basket in its hands, went about its business and hummed a song. Suddenly, bright glowing sand began to fall from the dark clouds in the sky, enveloping the earth in a strange rain. The frightened animals screamed in panic about the impending disaster. Afraid of becoming part of the sandy chaos, they rushed to find shelter in a hurry. Quickly putting on his hood, the creature with the horn hurried away, all the while saying how lucky people were in this regard. Ichiru, despite the rain that had started, resolutely went into the forest to get the necessary herbs and flowers. As soon as the raindrop touched the hand, it immediately spread out, disappearing into the air. This strange substance had neither smell nor taste. The poor squirrel, trying to find shelter in the shade of a tree, couldn't resist and, squealing in fright, fell from the branch. Seeing this, the orphan rushed towards the unfortunate animal, trying to catch it and save it from further disasters. Long ago, in an orphanage, children cried, begging the professor to do something to help a cat whose fur had suddenly turned black. The cat quickly disappeared, leaving behind only a thin cloud of sand. Kneeling down next to the students, the teacher began to explain in a soft and sad tone that because of the sand slowly falling from the sky, magical creatures live much less than people and are often forced to leave this world. The more sand the animal's fur absorbed, the less hope there was for salvation. The squirrel was almost in the hands of the girl standing below. But suddenly a strong wind arose and the small creature began to disperse in the air, turning into light dust. The professor, with a heavy sigh and deep regret, explained that it was impossible to stop this terrible process of turning into sand. Barely holding back large tears, Ichiru remained standing, her hands extended forward. She was about to return home when her foot suddenly slipped off the edge of the ledge. The ground beneath her feet began to rapidly disappear. A loud, frightened cry, full of despair and horror, burst from his mouth. Ichiru began to plummet downwards, the wind whistling in her ears and her heart beating wildly. When Futaba landed, she found something soft underneath her, like black wool. With surprise, the orphan realized that she was lying on a huge and terrible creature, a dragon with massive wings and powerful paws. Sensing something was wrong, the dragon opened his sparkling green eyes and stared at the intruder on his personal space and peace. The girl's heart sank into her heels with fear. This huge creature could easily attack her and take her life with one move. But instead of attacking, the huge beast only looked at her menacingly and ordered her to hurry and leave the forest. Ichiru was relieved to learn that the monster had no intention of eating her. She felt sorry for it, as the monster's fur was like the color of the night, symbolizing loneliness and sadness. The terrible dragon was taking his last breaths. The little lady was trying to get off him without causing any inconvenience. Wanting to somehow ease the suffering of the large creature, the girl began to gently stroke it. Her feminine hands glided softly over the dragon's coarse, dark fur. At the monster's questioning look, Ichiru, with a worried and despairing expression, asked if he was feeling any better. A question arose in my mind as to whether I should pet this monster the same way I would pet a dog. However, how lonely it must have been for a strong dragon to feel abandoned in the face of his inevitable death. Moreover, the image of little Mahu immediately appeared in my head, who, like this animal, was leaving the world completely alone. The huge reptile allowed Ichiru to continue his actions. It brought him hope and warmth. The girl hated herself for not being able to do more to help, when suddenly a rainbow light poured out of her hand, blinding her with its radiance. Startled, Futaba jumped back, looking at her upper limbs in surprise. The orphan was full of confusion and fear, because nothing like this had ever happened to her before. Lazily, with a shadow of interest in his eyes, the black beast watched what was happening, while the girl continued to hold her arms outstretched in front of her. The light grew brighter and suddenly the black sand that had flown off the monster's fur exploded into the air, heading straight towards the young lady's face. She immediately began to hastily shake off the unpleasant substance, trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. It was noticeable that in place of the monster's fur, a gray spot had appeared, which stood out sharply against the background of the rest of the black coating. And then the girl realized that all this time, she had magic that could cleanse other creatures of sand. With this powerful gift, she could free them from this painful burden. The orphan was very happy that she had the opportunity to reverse the transformation of monsters into sand. Breathing heavily, the dragon looked questioningly at the girl and waited for an explanation of what had just happened and how it could affect him. With renewed effort, the girl concentrated again to activate the magic and completely heal the large reptile. It was hard, but she did it. The magic worked, and soon there was another explosion of black sand. The dragon, noticing her efforts, sighed weakly and asked the little girl to return home without wasting her energy on him. Instead of listening to the dragon, Futaba firmly stated that once she completely healed him, she would immediately hug him tightly. Finally receiving approval from the great reptile, the girl smiled widely and sincerely. After another attempt, her previously flawlessly beautiful face was completely covered in dirt, soot, and earth. But progress was evident. Half of the dragon glowed a delicate green, radiating health and vitality, while the other half was still black and shadowed. The legs could no longer bear it, and Ichiru suddenly collapsed to the ground with a dull, deafening thud. Images of her lovingly and tenderly hugging her pet began to appear before the lady's inner gaze. These memories now seemed empty and hypocritical to her. Reaching out her trembling hand, Futaba tried unsuccessfully to shake off the oppressive feeling of guilt that was gnawing at her heart because of Mahu. In her new form, Futaba continued to hug the fluffy dog tenderly and affectionately. Tears, sparkling in the light, began to roll down her cheeks, reflecting the bitterness of loss and deep affection for her faithful friend. In reality, the huge reptile was still lying motionless on the ground, its massive body stretched out on the cold earth. The orphan understood that all her efforts and labors would be in vain if she did not finish what she started and heal the monster. Each step was graceful and decisive. The shine of the boots, reflecting the light, created a subtle play of highlights, shimmering and playing on the surface. Ichiru thought that perhaps she was still asleep, and that when she woke up, everything would fall into place and return to normal. Putting her hands on the reptile's warm fur, the girl began to heal it, concentrating all her attention on this process. When the dragon regained consciousness, he was completely free of the black sand, and his body was restored to its full glory. He could hardly believe that this was possible. His appearance again became green, like an emerald. The girl who had healed the monster slept peacefully, her cloak under her head. All her magical energy had been exhausted, taking away her strength. All dirty, she lay on the white sheets, wondering if the same thing had happened to her in her past life, or if everything was different. Using his powerful magic, the huge dragon carefully lifted the frail man high into the air. The next moment, in the blink of an eye, the reptilian figure transformed into a tall and handsome guy. He carefully picked up the sleeping girl in his arms. The words that the little girl had said earlier came into the boy's head, that she would hug him as soon as she completely removed all the black sand from her body. Turning his emerald eyes to the girl, the man, without waiting for an answer, thought out loud about whether all this was real and whether it corresponded to what she really wanted to do. Futaba lay on a soft bed, having been moved to a small, modest but neatly furnished wooden room. The orphan woke up from a familiar voice that sounded loudly in the silence of the room. When the man was asked if he was the dragon dying in the forest, he did not hesitate to immediately confirm it. They became acquainted. It turned out that the reptile's name was Hisui, and in response Ichiru, showing politeness, introduced herself and told about herself. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a brown rabbit appeared, greatly frightening the guest who was in the dragon's house. Kneeling down in front of the girl, he introduced himself as Fuka, the hair spirit. His soft voice and warm gaze created a feeling of tenderness and comfort. Hisui was displeased with the sudden appearance of the magical spirit, who in turn really wanted to see the girl who had been sleeping for so long and had finally woken up. The animal watched as the man held Futaba carefully in his arms and was drawn to what she could be to him. As a threat, the werewolf threatened to eat the rabbit if he accidentally gave out information to someone he shouldn't. The rabbit was quickly thrown out of the window so as not to irritate the owner of the estate, and the animal with a frightened squeal disappeared out of sight. When asked who the bunny was, Hisui replied with a grin that he was the main thorn in these parts. Staring awkwardly at her new clothes, Ichiru noticed that the clothes were clearly a size too big and probably belonged to a man. The healer's brown cloak hung on a chair next to the table in the center of the room, where there was also a large window letting in soft light. Dragons were known to be sacred creatures, close to the gods, and possessed incredible concentrations of magical power, according to ancient legends. Hisui was a dragon, and given that, he would meet anyone with ill intentions with anger, being able to easily take their life. It was important to Futaba that the magical monster was not only healthy, but also completely cleared of sand. When asked if she was okay, Ichiru barely held back her tears and, trying not to reveal her true feelings, answered in the affirmative. The boy was in perfect health and clearly felt better without the black burden that had previously weighed him down. Leaning against the wall, the werewolf, studying her with interest, asked the girl if she had used healing magic. Hesitantly, the orphan agreed that she could heal others. Her voice trembled, and her facial expression betrayed her inner doubts and lack of confidence in her own abilities. Their conversation was interrupted by the rabbit, who suddenly appeared, shocked by the revealed truth. In this world, doctors were usually called pharmacists, working in hospitals. Their duties also included examining patients and mixing medicines. Healers in this world were wizards who had the ability to heal others using magic and spells to restore strength and health. Magical healing was considered the most powerful of all magical abilities, and was nearly impossible to master through training. The bunny happily stated that, as expected, Ichiru had this divine blessing and was special. Hisui's presence confirmed that her healing magic was truly powerful and unique. Taking the girl by the hands, the rabbit, with an enthusiastic expression on his face, announced that God had finally heard the prayers of magical creatures and sent them a new savior. At that moment, Futaba remembered other magical creatures that she could heal, and this gave her hope. Moreover, if the orphan can save them, she will become closer to them and will be able to hug them, gently stroke their soft fur, filling her life and the life of the creatures with warmth and care. The girl's eyes opened wide at the prospect of spending her days with these cute creatures. Tired of listening to the bunny, Hisui grabbed him by the ears. However, the rabbit did not even think of stopping talking, insistently calling the dragon's house his property. Having disposed of the persistent pet, the werewolf once again focused on his guest, his gaze taking on a new intensity and seriousness, reflecting deep concentration and determination. The monster asked Futaba not to listen to the hare, explaining that everything was not as simple as he described. Leaning towards the girl, the dragon expressed doubt that she had healing magic, pointing out the lack of evidence for this. However, the werewolf also remembered their agreement. Taking her hand, he stated that they could fulfill the deal right now. Holding Ichiru closer to him and feeling the warm breath of her body, Hisui gently reminded her that she herself had expressed a desire to hug him, creating an atmosphere of tenderness and mutual closeness. Raising his hand, the dragon added that before losing consciousness, this was the lady's last wish, for the fulfillment of which the maiden paid with her life. His face took on an expression of submission, and the guy made it clear that he was ready to let her do whatever she wanted to him. Admiring the majesty of the large creature standing before her, Futaba's mouth dropped open in surprise. An awkward smile appeared on her face as Ichiru realized that she had gone a little overboard with her expression at that moment, feeling a little embarrassed and wanting to correct the situation. Without thinking twice and not wanting to miss such a good chance, the orphan rushed forward to hug the magical animal and press her nose into its soft fur. The animal's fur smelled pleasantly of young leaves and fresh greenery, and this aroma was so delightful that it was impossible to resist snuggling even closer. Moving away from the monster, Futaba, with a slight sadness and a gentle smile, asked the guy to come to this place again someday, since she could not get enough of the communication and the feeling of his soft fur. Before completely releasing the girl, the dragon warned her that under no circumstances should she use magic after leaving the barrier. Ichiru shuddered at the evil gaze of those green and dangerous eyes, feeling an icy chill run down her spine, like a harbinger of an impending threat. Hisui, brandishing his sharp fangs, sternly declared that it was necessary to keep silent about what had happened to his body. The orphan was terrified by the sight of the sharp object pressed to her throat. Even with all her strength, she knew that she could not heal everyone who needed healing. Before taking his paw away from her, Hisui contemptuously called the girl's magic a fraud and her a disappointment. Turning back into a human, he advised her with the utmost seriousness never to get involved with such a thing. Night fell on the city, and shadows enveloped everything around. The deserted streets remained deserted, without meeting a single living soul. Returning to her room and sitting on her bed, Ichiru found Fuka, who seemed immune to any tricks or deception. All this time he watched the orphan from behind the thick bushes and noticed her strange and thoughtful expression. To verify the presence of magical abilities, it was necessary to go to the palace, where there was an expert who could analyze the properties and abilities of other people. The girl's face darkened when she learned that such a procedure was very expensive, not to mention the cost of assembling an evaluation committee. However, in order for the healers to be able to do their job, the Empire paid them very well, providing them with a luxurious life. The wizards lived in expensive houses with golden furniture. Ichiru gave Fuku a distrustful look, as if she didn't believe his empty stories and promises. A mixture of skepticism and wariness could be seen in her eyes. Turning to the rabbit, the orphan said that the animal knew a lot, but she needed it not to reveal their conversation to Hisui, keeping it a complete secret. To the orphan's surprise, the little animal agreed to keep the secret, but demanded in exchange the use of her amazing magic. Fuku promised not to complain if the treatment failed, and assured that he would not reveal the secret powers, keeping them a secret from outsiders. A memory surfaced of the large reptile strongly recommending against using healing on anyone. Magic was an invisible, mystical substance that filled the world, known as an element. Manipulating and changing things with this particle was called sorcery. Wondrous spheres circled around the strange sign. Using magic was impossible if you tried to call upon an element that did not belong to you, or if you lacked strength. The girl quickly came to the conclusion that in any case, everything depends on the power of imagination and the ability to perceive the surrounding world, realizing that our perception can shape reality. Deciding to test her strength, Ichiru focused her energy and sent a stream of magic in the form of rainbow sparks towards Fuku, who was sitting on her lap. Her efforts paid off. Sand slowly but surely began to fall from the rabbit's fur, gradually spreading across the room and forming a thin layer on the floor that raised clouds of fine dust. And so, in a moment, the rabbit again acquired its original color. As it was born, the animal's fur shone with cleanliness and health. Happy Fuku jumped for joy. His body was filled with lightness, and a warm feeling, like the sun's rays, gently enveloped him, bringing comfort. But when the bunny tried to thank Ichiru, she had already lost consciousness from exhaustion and fell powerlessly onto the bed. Having regained her strength a little, the orphan opened her eyes and said with a smile that everything was fine. The contented rabbit couldn't stop running around the room with joy. The monster couldn't believe that he could return to his original color and become the same as he was before. The amazed girl, being next to her new friend, came to the conclusion that she really did have the abilities of a healer. But then, in the forest, the dragon expressed his disappointment about the guest's powers. Lying on the soft sheets, Ichiru could only hope for the revelation of her new power, waiting for the moment when her inner abilities would manifest and open new horizons for her. Turning to face Fuku, Futaba quietly said that everything was fine. Deep in her heart, she didn't want the encounters with the strange creatures of this world to end. In the darkness, a tall man stood by the window, watching the deadly sand fall like rain, creating an ominous atmosphere filled with foreboding. It was Hisui who overheard his new acquaintance's conversation about her desire to learn more about magic and ability expertise. Merciless magical sand fell from the sky onto the deserted streets of the city. All the monsters had long since hidden in their shelters, afraid of being caught in this terrible hail. On the table there were cookies decorated in the shape of cute rabbits looking very appetizing, and next to the cookies there was aromatic tea. Over breakfast, Ichiru discussed with Fuku complaints about the evaluation committee, which was charging too much for its services. The rabbit explained to her that he had previously had no wealth and was not popular because of his sandy appearance. However, now everything would change. Taking a hot cup of aromatic drink in her palms, Futaba thoughtfully looked at the bunny and asked if there was a particle of magical creatures in his blood. Not receiving a clear answer, Futaba picked up a knife and began to carefully spread jam on the toast. Nothing bad should happen if her knowledge of healing magic became more extensive in the library. Bit into the toast? She thought back to her futile attempts to cast magic on herself. The taste of the crisp bread soaked in jam was incredible. Placed in the girl's hand was a gold earring with green scales that Fuku had given her, its shine and exquisite design reflecting deep symbolism. Putting his hands behind his head, the little bunny admitted, a little embarrassed, that it was actually a gift from Hisui. Futaba listened attentively as the bunny explained that the orphan could now move freely around the dragon's house using this decoration. Thoughtfully and very carefully, Futaba brought the jewel closer to her face to carefully examine the earring, studying its every detail and enjoying its exquisite shine. The gold looked very beautiful on the girl's ear, harmoniously combining with her image. It not only gave her an elegant look, but also contained protective magic, designed to protect its owner. Having explained everything that was necessary, Fuku quietly slipped out of the room and disappeared, leaving behind only a slight hint of mystery. The girl was left alone, holding in her hands a beautiful accessory, which now became her property. Ichiru happily put on her new dress and went for a walk, feeling the fabric of her dress flow softly around her as she walked down the stairs. In her mind, the orphan dreamed of brushing Hisui's green fur, imagining how he enjoyed the process and how her care brought him pleasure and peace. In the distance, at the door of a large house, stood two ladies. They were discussing how nice it would be to take under their care a new child, preferably with a beautiful coat. Feeling that something was wrong, Futaba decided to follow them. Their conversation and behavior made her anxious with a premonition of impending trouble. Slowly opening the door through which two ladies entered, the girl shuddered in fear, colliding with a blue, strange bear. The bear was also studying her, putting his paw to his mouth in an expression of surprise, as if trying to comprehend what was happening and express his bewilderment at meeting a strange lady. However, upon noticing the expensive earring on the client, the bear immediately changed his attitude to a more positive and friendly one. Inside was a blue room filled with wealth and luxury. People dressed in elegant clothes were sitting in comfortable and expensive chairs. Ichiru, unaware of what was going on around her, also received a black mask designed to hide her face and provide anonymity in this mysterious and unsettling environment. In the woman's hand was a black card with the number 8 written in an elegant font. The people around were excitedly discussing that today promised to be a day full of fun and exciting events. Everyone was looking forward to amazing impressions and vivid emotions. The host of the event was dressed in a bear mask and blue clothes. After enthusiastically thanking everyone present for participating in the auction, the man proudly assured them that the dolls on display were true masterpieces. Futaba was surprised to realize that she had come to a completely different place from where dolls were sold. The curtain parted to reveal a stage where a wolf boy was sitting on a sofa, chained up, with his eyes closed and a sweet, touching look on his face. When the boy opened his eyes, everyone around him was shocked by their unusual yellow hue, reminiscent of bright amber, emitting a warm and mysterious glow. Even Ichiru couldn't resist the werewolf's charm and managed to hide her admiration for how good and handsome he was. But suddenly the girl realized that something was wrong. The creature in front of her did not look like a doll. It seemed to be a living being. The boy sat on the sofa, showing off his sharp fangs, which he bared in response to the predatory exclamations and cries of the audience, as if preparing for an attack and emphasizing his terrifying nature. The behavior of the adult ladies in the room did not change. They continued to sit with grins on their faces, their hungry gazes never leaving the goods. The man leaning on the arm of the chair looked most interested in what was happening. It was a shadow auction. The presenter continued to convincingly praise the wolf cub, describing his snow-white skin, undisturbed by sand, and the rarest color of his fur. Ichiru shuddered in horror as she saw the aristocrat, with a vulgar smile on his face, turn red with excitement. The girl was overcome with a feeling of horror when she realized that this boy was the target of an adult man with evil intentions, who was trying to buy him. The opening bid was 1,000,000 gold pieces. Soon the hands of the women in the room began to rise one after another, each offering ever higher amounts, not stingy with their money. However, the highest bid was made by aristocrat number 7, offering an impressive 3,000,000 gold, which attracted everyone's attention and caused a wave of shock and delight in the room. Ichiru couldn't let that happen, and in a desperate attempt to prevent the purchase, she quickly raised her hand, offering a full 5 million. When silence reigned in the room, the girl began to reproach herself for such a stupid act, because she only had 1,000 gold pieces in her pocket. But the man did not lose his head and, raising his number up, placed the final bet of 10 million coins, which significantly exceeded the other offers. With her mouth open in shock, Ichiru was unable to utter a word upon hearing such an astronomical amount. So the item was sold, and its new owner was gentleman number 7, who seemed to be eager to pick up his new doll. The leader raised his hands and congratulated the wolf cub with satisfaction, announcing that he now had a new master, his voice trembling with excitement and pride. However, instead of joy and happiness, the boy only contemptuously ordered those around him to shut up and demanded that he be returned back to the forest where his home was. The boy's speech was interrupted by a loud click that suddenly sounded in the silence and made him freeze in fear, feeling his heart beat in his chest with inexpressible anxiety and anticipation. The man in the bear mask said with satisfaction that the wolf cub apparently still remembered the sound of the switch on the collar and the consequences of pressing the button. The silver collar was equipped with a secret mechanism that released a rain of sand that was immune to magical protection and terrifying to magical creatures. Pressing the button on the back of the collar activates an injection needle. Within minutes, the monster's body will turn to dust and scatter to the wind. When the boy was caught, he had with him his faithful friend, a squirrel, who was also put in a collar, and then disappeared into the sand. Ichiru was shocked and unable to move from the cruelty that the aristocrats displayed while enjoying their superiority in this room. Leaning forward, she was determined that she needed to tell someone what was happening and what terrible plans these people had. But then suddenly a blue bear appeared before her and let her in. He wanted her precious earring as payment. The girl could not give up the earring, as this accessory was important to her connection with the Hisui house. Refusal angered the bear, and he stared at her aggressively, ready for action. At this time, the aristocrat approached the poor boy and, with a sincere expression on his face, declared that now he would take care of him and love him with all his heart. Lifting the boy by the chin, the man was ready to provide the wolf cub with all the luxury and wealth he could offer. Over time, the master could even remove the collar from the doll when she became fully accustomed to life in the new estate, and her behavior became obedient enough to justify trust and freedom. Suddenly, the boy bit his new master's hand, not hesitating to show his anger. His eyes flashed with fury as he ordered him to remove his hand and called the rich man an old man. But instead of anger, the man only shuddered with laughter, trying to restrain himself. The nobleman was not going to tolerate such a rebellion from his goods and was determined to show that disobedience would not go without consequences. Grabbing the wolf cub by the collar, the rich man pressed the button located on the back of the silver collar without hesitation, demonstrating his decision and inflexibility. At this time, Ichiru was fighting the bear, but upon hearing the sound of a button being pressed, she turned around in shock so abruptly that the black mask flew off her face. Experiencing excruciating pain, the doll suffered in the hands of its master, twitching from the unpleasant stabbing sensations. Without giving the boy the slightest chance to escape, the aristocrat promised to let him go and end his suffering only if he politely apologized and promised not to behave like that again. Crying and unable to stop his tears, the wolf cub finally gave in and wanted to start asking for forgiveness, but he didn't have time. A large blue teddy bear head was thrown at the nobleman, causing the man to drop the werewolf from his hands and stagger to the side. The host of the event was outraged by the guests' behavior, which disrupted the atmosphere of the celebration, and began to express his displeasure. But Ichiru's anger was even more obvious. With hatred in her eyes, she glared at the assembled nobles and, without hiding her emotions, loudly asked what the hell was going on. She couldn't get rid of the nagging words of Hisui, who strictly ordered her not to use her powers in the presence of others. However, the girl's heart literally broke at the sight of the poor wolf cub, who was trying with all his might to remove the bad collar. His desperate efforts and torment were too painful. Weeping, he begged the people around him for forgiveness and salvation. His voice was broken by sobs, and his eyes were full of desperate hope for mercy. Futaba couldn't hold back her tears when she saw the wolf cub suffering, and quickly rushed forward, ready to do everything she could to help the poor creature. Reaching her hands forward, she quickly pressed the button on the collar and, focusing her magical energy, began the healing process. The scales from which the accessory was made sparkled in the light of the sparks that flew throughout the space. A magical shield began to form around the girl and the boy, which not only protected them from the touch of strangers, but also protected them from evil, creating an impenetrable barrier. The earring hanging on his ear fell down with a crash as the magic shield began its work. Those around could only watch in shock at the barrier in the form of a glowing hair, which did not allow them to get closer to the strange guest and her companion. Panting heavily, Ichiru tried to catch her breath after the grueling fight and intense use of her powers. Every attempt to inhale seemed like an effort that required a huge amount of effort. The wolf cub opened his yellow eyes and looked questioningly at the collar, which no longer released sand onto the poor creature's skin. The boy sadly pulled away from the girl's touch and warned her that everyone who touched the collar died because of the evil magic cast on it. The angry guests and the men in blue bear costumes began to slowly but surely break through the barrier created by Ichiru in order to destroy the magical barrier and get to them. Trying to break the iron chain, Futaba strained with all her might, but all her efforts were in vain. The wall slowly but surely broke down, and screams could be heard from outside, calling for the girl and the doll to be grabbed immediately. The sounds grew louder, adding tension to the situation. Suddenly, the girl staggered and was suddenly caught by a familiar man in a long cloak who appeared behind her. Her savior was the faithful Hisui, who appeared at the most critical moment to protect Ichiru, showing amazing courage and devotion. Having put the girl on her feet next to the sofa, the dragon turned out to be really real, and not just a figment of her imagination or a clouding of her mind. When the girl used magic in the city, Fuku created a magical shield to protect her. The reptile's job was to come to her aid in person. But what interested Hisui most was the reason why Futaba was crying big tears at that moment. The reason for her sadness was related to the tragedy that happened to a boy who was kidnapped from his home in the woods and put up for auction like a doll. Even in his sleep, the little werewolf could not calm down. He was constantly trembling with fear and could not find peace, as if the shadows of horrors haunted the boy even in his deepest dreams. Disappointed and with her head down, Ichiru remembered that the boy was still very young in age, and this realization further increased her bitterness and sympathy. Suddenly, powerful hands grabbed the chain and tore the metal in half, as if it was made of ordinary paper, demonstrating incredible strength and indomitable power. Hisui was incredibly strong to be able to break the chain that bound the boy so easily, which impressed his lovely companion. Deciding to hide the werewolf, the dragon wrapped his cloak around him, carefully masking the traces of the magical healing power and the lack of sand. The boy was carefully handed over to the orphan's hands like a priceless treasure, surrounded by warmth and care, as if every movement was aimed at preserving his fragile safety. Hisui hugged the lady, who had gone through many trials that day, and tenderly said that he would take care of everything himself, promising to provide her with the peace and protection she deserved. The men who had organized the entire act watched in amazement as the barrier crumbled, and soon noticed that a new participant had joined them. The host quickly clapped his hands, trying to attract the attention of the aristocrats and calm them down, worried that there might not be enough time to restore order. From the gems emerged huge bear golems, their glittering forms gleaming ominously. They were given orders to deal with the strangers and drive them away. The event leader explained that despite their diamond-like appearance, these golem bears were formidable enemies and could rival 4 squads of knights. Thieves who dare to break the rules will face an inevitable sentence, which will be inescapable and severe, as well as appropriate retribution. Suddenly a gust of wind appeared in the room, and a cloaked figure surrounded by a whirlwind said that everyone present in the hall was wrong. Hisui covered the girl's eyes with his hand to shield her from the horrors that were about to unfold in this room. The dragon's eyes shone with malice and hatred as he passed judgment on the arrogant aristocrats for their evil intentions. Ichiru felt herself losing consciousness. She could barely make out the howling wind and the blurry figures of monsters that flickered before her eyes. Everything that was happening seemed to her like a scene from a book she had recently read. Every detail and event resembled pages of the work. Those who dared to come with ill intentions were subjected to their evil green gaze, piercing through them, and their lives were taken without mercy. The three of them sat, completely exhausted, near the window through which the sun's rays streamed, filling the room with soft light. When Futaba came to, she suddenly jumped up and asked where they were. Hisui explained that he had used teleportation. All the people who took part in the auction were arrested by the guards called by Fuku to ensure order and prevent any possible unrest. Awkwardly, the rabbit stood and sheepishly accepted compliments from the officer, who, amazed, asked how this small and fragile animal could defeat two large and powerful golems. The representative of order held a collar in his hand and looked in amazement at the invention created by the nobles, a torture device with a sand rain. Sitting on the floor next to the boy, Hisui said that he wanted to slightly tweak the boy's memories. He explained that it was necessary since he had witnessed Ichiru's magical abilities and face. Lowering his haughty gaze, the dragon also added that if the werewolf began to cause trouble, the reptile would devour the rest of the memory, as it had done with the traders of living creatures. Surprised, the girl froze in place at the words about eating other people's memories. The worst part was that Futaba had no memory of the effects of using her magic. As a result, she could be immediately chained up and used as a tool to heal another product. The orphan, her head down, was horrified by what could have happened, but despite her fear and anxiety, she still found the strength and courage to come up with a worthy excuse. The reason for using magic for healing was because a boy suffered greatly at the hands of cruel nobles who tortured him day and night, depriving the poor boy of any hope of salvation. Coldly interrupting the little girl, Hisui stated that he had warned her about the consequences of using magic, and despite his warnings, she still couldn't avoid trouble. Ichiru broke out in a cold sweat as she saw the anger radiating from the man. His face contorted in rage and the tension in the air was almost palpable. The girl bitterly realized her stupidity and, bowing her head, sincerely apologized to the dragon for her recklessness. However, based on his logic, it turns out that Ichiru was also wrong when she cured him of the black sand the first time. Pressing her hand to her chest, the orphan said that at that moment it would have been better if she had no power at all, if she could not help in such a difficult situation. Jumping up from her seat, the girl firmly declared that she would never back down from her point of view and would definitely undergo a magical examination. Futaba, unable to keep her balance due to her clumsiness, began to fall backwards, her arms helplessly flailing in the air, and her expression resembling a mixture of surprise and fear. The young man caught her gently, deftly catching her with his arms and not allowing her to fall. His reaction was quick and confident. The dragon sighed tiredly and called Ichiru a real child who acted stupidly and inexperienced. Sitting in the room, the rabbit told the girl that when Hisui started to go wild, he could never stop himself. The rabbit winked at his companion and, with a playful twinkle in his eye, said that the large reptile probably cared for her very much. The orphan was embarrassed to hear herself called a weak girl who desperately risked her own life to save the dragon. After some time, Hisui offered to live with her if she was going to continue to not appreciate her gift and act stupidly. If she decided to do something again, the orphan would need someone who could get her out of trouble. The dragon was ready to take drastic measures. As luck would have it, an image of a man who spoke of the possibility of absorbing someone's memory without any problems arose in my memory. With his arms folded across his chest, the master of the house waited patiently for his companion in the open air. His gaze was directed into the distance, and a light breeze played with his clothes, creating a feeling of peace and confidence. Ichiru stood across from him, accepting his invitation to live together, knowing that this decision would free her from the costs of rent, food, and other expenses, allowing her to focus on accumulating capital. Casually, with a slight smile on his lips, the guy asked if she was afraid to go into the dragon's lair. It would be a lie to say that the terrifying beast did not inspire fear. Its incredible wings, glittering green eyes, and sharp fangs caused trembling and trembling. However, as a person, Hisui was a surprisingly sweet and calm guy, radiating warmth and care. The orphan smiled sweetly, her eyes sparkled with sincerity. The lady said that everything was fine and she didn't mind at all. Her voice sounded soft and soothing. Another of her arguments was that the animal was incredibly soft and fluffy, which could melt even the coldest heart and cause an indescribable feeling of tenderness. Out of the corner of his eye, the owner of the house noticed that she had rather unusual tastes and preferences for a young lady. The tenant snapped his fingers at the orphan's forehead to get her attention, the unexpected gesture both abrupt and playful. So he cast a spell on her, and then raised his leg into the air and, as if dancing, walked through the invisible shield that veiled his movement. An outstretched hand, slightly curved in an inviting gesture, invited the guest to come with him to a new home and refuge. The girl's palm was also extended towards the man, gently touching his hand and thus expressing her deep trust and readiness to accept the offer. The magical beast's estate was vast and magnificent, fully reflecting its majesty. The architecture and decoration were exquisite and finely crafted, creating an atmosphere of subtle grandeur. Soon, delicious tea was served, and Ichiru and Hisui were comfortably seated in the kitchen, discussing the house rules that should be followed. The boy suggested that she consider this scarf a symbol of his accidental rescue, which led the orphan into an awkward and slightly embarrassed position. To begin with, the girl should have known that the Allen Empire had won a war of conquest 10 years ago. This information was key to understanding the current situation and context. The girl nodded quietly and admitted that she already knew about it. Her agreement was filled with calm and confident understanding. The war ended when the children in the orphanage were only 5 years old. The town of Prui where they lived was not involved in the fighting, and no traces of the violence were felt in the surrounding area. Ichiru suddenly froze when she learned that during the fighting, the dragon was under the command of the imperial palace, and directly under the leadership of His Majesty. Also in the castle during the conflict was a court healer who soon had to join the army as a military medic. The healer was valued extremely highly, since his unique magic was absolutely irreplaceable, and no one else possessed such abilities. However, during one of the fierce battles, the magician, having exhausted his strength to the last drop, fell from exhaustion, unable to withstand the onslaught of enemies and exhaustion. Futaba was quick to counter her interlocutor, reminding him that peaceful times had arrived, in contrast to the turbulent and conflict-ridden periods of the past. The dragon's memories retain a vivid image of Hisui standing in the mud, patiently listening to the accusations against him regarding Malu's death. His comrade-in-arms lay in bed, recuperating and venting his frustration at not being allowed to simply turn into sand to avoid suffering. When asked what was wrong with the tea, the girl nervously replied that everything was fine, although she could not taste it after the cruel story. The guy calmly continued drinking tea as if nothing had happened. His calm demeanor contrasted with the tense atmosphere. The girl's room was not very large in size, but it was surprisingly clean and cozy. It contained everything that could be useful: a bed, a table with a chair, a chest of drawers for storing things, and windows through which warm rays of sunlight penetrated. Enchanted, Futaba couldn't believe her happiness in her new home, enjoying every corner. Before leaving, Hisui said that she was free to use everything in the room, and if she had any questions or concerns, she could always come to him for help. The girl was immensely happy that the dragon finally recognized her magic and stopped calling it strange magic. Remembering the grim stories about the high mortality rate of healers, the orphan shuddered with fear and horror, feeling cold shivers running down her spine. Fuka said healers who were not tied to hospitals were free to travel, working as freelancers. They could move from one city to another, offering their services to those who needed them. In addition, when asked about the boy they had saved, the dragon said that he had started a new life in a secluded forest located nearby. For Ichiru, it was a real relief, as knowing that the boy they had saved had found peace in the quiet forest was the closure of her worries. But then Hisui, suddenly and disappointingly, destroyed her hopes of meeting the werewolf, stating that it would not be possible to organize such a meeting. Mahu's memories were filled with warm moments spent with his mistress, whom he truly loved. These memories were filled with joy and tenderness. Every moment was like a precious gift. The werewolf was awakened from his sleep when the squirrel, his faithful friend and companion, gently woke him up to relieve him from the tormenting nightmare that was disturbing his night's rest. They quickly sought shelter in a deep cave to escape the relentless sand rain that poured from the sky like an ominous storm, seeking to bury all living things under layers of fine, cutting sand. When the boy said how lonely he was, the squirrel suggested going to a city where other people and magical creatures lived to find new friends. The monster thought about his friend's words, his face softened, and a shadow of embarrassment appeared in his eyes. Unfortunately, as soon as they arrived in the city, they were immediately caught, collared, and deprived of their freedom, leaving them in complete hopelessness. Remembering the terrible events that had happened to him, the wolf cub sat on a hillock, his face buried in his knees, and trembled with fear. Suddenly, thanks to his keen hearing, the boy's ear twitched from a strange sound he heard in the distance. Raising his head, the werewolf saw two guests, a girl and a guy, who were heading towards the forest dweller. Ichiru, trying not to frighten the baby even more, carefully greeted him in a soft and soothing voice. Recognizing the stranger as the same girl from the cruel aristocrats who was sitting at the auction, the boy gets on all fours and, growling threateningly, takes a fighting stance, as if preparing to defend himself. Covering the girl with his cloak, the dragon declared that if the boy even came close and dared to touch her, he would not remain on the sidelines. Standing in the corner of the room, Hisui, with a slight note of sadness in his voice, explained to the girl that the werewolf had lost his memory and now did not remember who she was to him. The aggressive boy pointed his finger at Futaba and claimed that all the aristocrats, including her, could harm him. The orphan recoiled, her eyes wide with shock as she realized it was all true, and despair and horror welled up inside her. The upset girl looked down. The moment when the collector boy, with a greedy gleam in his eyes, approached her, trying to buy the doll, Ichiru intervened, deciding to stop the scoundrel. At this point, the lady became very similar to Mahu's owner, who also tried in every way to protect her pet. The girl apologized for not being able to completely prevent the disaster and save the boy. Tears began to form in her eyes like pearls, reminding her of her sincere regret. The boy, filled with anger, ordered her not to cry, claiming that shedding tears was a vile thing. Sitting at a table in a cozy corner, Ichiru, immersed in reading a book, slowly and carefully turned the pages, without rushing, as if listening to every word and penetrating the depth of the text. A shiver ran through the lady's body as a wind suddenly appeared in the room, filling its atmosphere with an inexplicable and sharp cold. Holding a warm blanket in his hands, Hisui suddenly appeared in the apartment and anxiously reported that mysterious ice sparrows had begun to appear in the forest, as if frozen by the spirit of winter. When the lady asked who they were, the dragon explained that they were ice-bird spirits, harmless and fickle creatures that flew from one place to another. With kindness and care, the werewolf handed Ichiru soft blankets, knowing that there would be frost at night and it was important to keep warm and comfortable. The huge reptile rarely took the form of a dragon, since with such a body it was difficult to hide from the sand rain in everyday life, and this became a real burden. Placing his hand on his chest, the man noticed that Futaba seemed to really enjoy touching his green fur. The orphan shifted from foot to foot in embarrassment, not knowing what to do or where to put herself in this situation. Putting his hand on the girl's head, the guy began to gently stroke her, showing reciprocal affection and trying to calm her down. Maneuvering skillfully, the wolf cub ran away from the birds of cold, who seemed to be pursuing him, not wanting to be left behind and trying to catch up with the little fugitive. The thing was that the sparrows just wanted to play with him, and the boy considered their attempts stupid and inappropriate. Finally, one of the white birds grabbed the werewolf and, using all its weight, pinned him to the ground, like fate fulfilled with effort and determination. Tired of his own unsuccessful attempts to free himself, the boy stopped and, feeling the onset of cold, slowly began to fall asleep. The little dog was dozing peacefully on its soft bed, experiencing a strange sensation, unable to move from an unknown excitement. The dog knew that if he didn't pretend and hide his feelings, his owner would be upset about it and would be sad. So Mahu, without thinking, barked loudly and gave a sign that everything was okay, hoping in this way to deceive his owner until the evening. With sleepy eyes, looking into the distance, the wolf cub woke up from the dream that haunted him, which did not want to stop and continued to torment him. He was not the dog named Mahu, but he was still eager to meet the owner who cared for her pet with such care and love. Dressed in warm clothes and holding a torch in her hand, Ichiru quickly ran through the forest, trying not to miss a single sign in the silence of the night. With determination, she pounced on the sparrows, waving the torch and trying to scare them away from the werewolf, using the flame as a shield to protect him and prevent further threats. The birds, frightened by the terrible lady with fire, quickly rushed to run away, trying to hide from her rage and dangerous flame. Futaba walked towards the boy, worried about how the frost covered his entire body and afraid that it might cause him injury. The boy, perceiving the lady from the auction as a potentially dangerous aristocrat, screamed in fear, begging her not to come even one step closer to him. Ichiru nevertheless approached the guy, but not to attack, but to cover him with a warm blanket, since it was a cold night, and to offer him to spend the night at the estate. The orphan affectionately told how she received permission from Hisui to bring a guest into their home, where the wolf cub was met with comfort and warmth, warmed by a warm stove. And again the image of Mahu's owner appeared in my head, apologizing for the delay, smiling at her pet with a caring expression on her face. Ichiru herself also suggested that they go together, accompanying her offer with a friendly tone. For some reason, the dragon's familiarity strongly reminded the werewolf of the girl from the dream, creating a feeling of mysterious déjà vu and an uncertain connection. Night fell and autumn was drowning in shadow, illuminated only by twinkling stars that created a mysterious and calm glow in the darkness. The fireplace gently warmed the people inside, giving them what they needed on a cold night, light and warmth. Ichiru politely offered her guest the opportunity to rest on the bed, while she herself readily resigned herself to taking a nap on the floor. After receiving a refusal, Futaba, before completely falling asleep, said that if the boy needed anything, he could feel free to contact her at any time. Soon the lady dozed off on the floor, and the boy, sitting motionless and lost in his thoughts, thoughtfully watched the flickering fires of the fireplace, unable to sleep due to anxiety and insomnia. Casting a glance at the mistress of the house, the boy was full of surprise and bewilderment, thinking about how one could draw a comparison between a real woman and that idealized maiden from a dream. Then, in the clearing, the dragon said that all those who hurt the boy had received their deserved punishment, and now justice had been restored. The wolf cub did not want to stop, and was determined to take revenge on his offenders at the next meeting for the death of his friend. The wise elder magical beast tried to convince the younger one that by taking revenge, he would not experience true relief, and that revenge would only deepen his inner suffering. Looking at the sleeping Ichiru, the boy could already guess that she was different from the other nobles at the auction. It wasn't hard to do. Leaning over the sleeping girl, the wolf cub decided to bite her, hoping that this would bring relief and help get rid of the hatred that was tearing apart her fragile soul. Suddenly, Futaba placed her hand on the werewolf's soft fur and began to gently stroke the boy. Feeling something fluffy pressed against her, she immediately pulled the boy into her arms and under the blanket to protect him from the cold. The wolf cub, trying hard to escape from the strong and relentless embrace, found that all his efforts were futile and fruitless. The boy stopped when the girl received a charge of tenderness, feeling his heart fill with something heavy, plunging into a fog of melancholy. Accidentally comparing reality with a dream, the werewolf was confused by the familiar words, which suddenly reminded him of something distant and forgotten. The master and Mahu existed only in the world of dreams, where their existence could not intersect with reality, remaining exclusively a figment of the imagination. But all attempts to refer to the dream stopped the moment Ichiru whispered the name of her pet from her past life. Tears appeared in the werewolf's eyes when he finally realized that his beloved mistress was standing before him. Sitting by the window in the semi-darkness, the boy fought with himself, immersed in confusion, where illusions intertwined with reality, creating an unbearable confusion. The werewolf quickly came to the conclusion that he was the same Mahu who had died in the past and was born again to meet again with those who were dear to him. Pressing his face against his mistress's warm hand, Mahu felt relief and a significant improvement in his well-being, as if he had found long-lost happiness. Ichiru woke up and discovered that she was not alone. There was a guest of the estate at her side, who unexpectedly appeared nearby. At breakfast, the wolf cub was again next to her, not wanting to move away from the girl even a step, as if tied by an invisible thread that connects him to her. and only rare glances, full of devotion and trust, reminded of the deep connection between them. Annoyed by this behavior, Hisui ordered the boy to sit next to her and not on his companion's lap to avoid further inconvenience. To this, Mahu declared that he would never lose what was dear to him, and turning to face his mistress, said that his name was what he proudly carried with him. With the most honest expression, the werewolf said that his name was Shitori, deciding to hide his real name and keep the secret of his true identity. The lady quickly agreed to call her new friend Shitori without any resistance and accepting the boy's choice. A happy smile appeared on her face after the guy apologized for being rude. In that world, Mahu couldn't stand his weakness and the fact that he was a heavy burden for his mistress, unable to do anything in his dog form. Grabbing the omelet with his fangs, the werewolf felt that in his new life he could do more to protect Ichiru and be more useful than before. Watching quietly, the boy followed the conversation between the dragon and the maiden, who were happily discussing the upcoming day and their plans for the day. The magical beast was confronted about the use of cutlery and was promised a serious talk with him a little later. Futaba was already impatiently waiting for the boy in her room when he returned from a long and important conversation with Hisui, ready to discuss what had accumulated during this time. Sitting down on the sofa, Shitori explained that the owner of the estate had demanded several obligations from him, and only after fulfilling these conditions would he give permission to live in the house. Covering himself to hide his embarrassment, the wolf cub timidly asked if Ichiru liked Hisui, jealous and watching their closeness. The girl, seeing how sweet it was from Mahu, promised that everything would be fine, assuring that they could always be together and there was no need to worry. Futaba couldn't understand where such drastic changes in the werewolf came from, but despite this, she was also sincerely happy about these changes. Having met with the caring mistress of the estate, Fuku inquired about her well-being and found out how things were going with her birth and the condition of Hisui. The real reason for the girl's visit to the rabbit was her new request to remove sand from the animal's fur, which had again stuck to its fur, giving it an unpresentable appearance. The bitter truth suddenly dawned on Ichiru when he realized that the sand rains were not going to stop and would continue to fall upon their world. Hearing a quiet knock on the door, the dragon carefully opened it and met the gaze of his guest, who stood before him like a bright fragment from a dream. Overcoming his overconfidence, the magical monster Futaba began to eagerly inquire whether any new sand had stuck to him. The virgin, watching the green reptile, involuntarily approached it, feeling curiosity and a desire to learn more about the mysterious nature. Brushing the hair away from her forehead, Mucha gently touched and pressed her face to Ichiru's, feeling their breaths merge into one. After making sure that everything was in order from the front, the girl walked around the monster from the other side and began to check its back, carefully examining every detail. Thinking that the orphan wanted to inspect her shirtless body, Hisui removed his top to provide better access for the girl. The back was as clean as the front, with no traces of sand to mar the perfect cleanliness. Embarrassed, the lady froze in place, feeling the heat running down her cheeks and coloring them pink. By chance, unable to restrain herself, she burst out with a compliment about how beautiful the dragon was, and, feeling awkward, immediately began to reproach herself for her inappropriate words. When the man, about to take off his pants, started to move in that direction, Ichiru screamed in panic that he shouldn't do that. In her excitement, the little girl accidentally tripped and started to fall. The bare-chested dragon instantly caught her with his powerful and tenacious hands, showing incredible strength and agility. Approaching the woman's ruby-red ear, he gently whispered that she needed to calm down and collect her thoughts in order to find inner peace. Sitting on the couch with Shitori, the girl tried to calm her frantically beating heart in order to restore her inner peace. And then came the sad realization. She should have checked the guy's dragon form, not his human one. At this time, Hisui stood alone with his shirt unbuttoned, looking at his skin covered in black sand, which was hidden from prying eyes. The subjects ran up to the lord, concerned about his condition as he leaned against the wall in an attempt to maintain his balance. Instead of calming down, Hisui sternly asked if they considered him a talentless creature who could fall over such a trifle, and ordered them to disappear from his sight. The syringe contained a mysterious green liquid, which, despite the complete darkness around, emitted a soft, mystical glow. Leaning on the stand and relying on his last strength, the Lord was ready to make any sacrifices, just to preserve the victory he had won and minimize losses. He grabbed his head when suddenly an unbearable pain arose, capable of not only disturbing his peace, but also driving him crazy, plunging him into a fog of torment. With the help of magic, the dragon created potions, using his ancient knowledge and mystical powers to make magical mixtures with unique properties. Sitting on the bed, Hisui looked at his black hands, while behind him harsh words and ridicule were heard, causing inner turmoil. Ichiru suddenly stopped in her tracks when her attention was caught by something unusual and intriguing that flashed in the depths of the forest like a mysterious sign. She was in this place for the first time, but she already intuitively felt that the roses should bloom, and not wither as was happening now. Taking them home with her, Futaba pulled out a reference book and discovered that these flowers were not ordinary, but magical, which greatly expanded their mysterious nature. Deciding to try her magic on these flowers, the girl raised her hand, from which a sparkling light was already emanating, ready to reveal the secrets of the magical plants. Rainbow light was a symbol of the divine in this country, and was an extremely rare phenomenon, occurring only in the most special circumstances. Sitting at the table in her room, Ichiru gradually explored the boundaries of her magic, immersing herself in learning and understanding its capabilities. And so, after a few moments of persistent effort, her efforts were rewarded. The roses bloomed again and filled the air with a pleasant aroma. Futaba's mouth was covered in amazement at the beauty of the plants, and she began to think about what to do with them. She should take them to the pharmacy and sell them to profit from their rare properties. The pharmacist was also pleasantly surprised to see the excellent condition of the flowers, which had been difficult to preserve due to the sandy rains. Upon learning that the plants had been collected in remote parts of the Holy Land, the woman recoiled in horror, shocked by what she saw and unable to believe what was happening. Ichiru couldn't understand what was so strange about this until she was told that the holy territory was inhabited by many monsters ready to attack. The image that immediately came to mind was of Hisui allowing her to take as many of the local herbs as she wanted, and who was completely unlike a terrible monster. There was a potion called Rosette, which was made using rare misty roses that only grow in the magical corners of the sacred forest. Rosette was a magical dye for magical creatures, capable of temporarily changing the color of fur or hair, and was also the best way to remove black sand from a beast's body, although its price was quite high. The shop owner thought for a moment and realized that creating this potion required special skill and rare ingredients. Just as she began to think about this, her thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of a new client, whose pink dress flowed across the floor, attracting everyone's attention with its elegant and mesmerizing appearance. A lovely lady with white hair and pink eyes, clearly an aristocrat, entered and came for a new portion of Rosette. Ichiru couldn't take her eyes off the enchanting Lady Ain, who looked stunning and delightful, like the epitome of exquisite style and refined elegance. The upset lady sighed when she learned that the potion was out of stock and that it would take a couple of days to prepare it, since the flowers had only recently arrived at the store. Lady Ain was well aware of the side effects of frequent use of Rosette, but this did not stop her or prevent her from continuing to use the potion. Suddenly, spider legs grew out from under her dress, and the lady screamed loudly, expressing her indignation, since with such a terrible body, she could not meet her beloved. Approaching the trembling Ichiru, Aine asked if she had scared her with her sudden and unusual transformation. Covering her face with her hand, the maiden gazed at her terrible appearance covered in black sand, and hopefully dreamed of becoming beautiful again thanks to Rosette's potion. Anger and panic overwhelmed the sweet lady, and the fear of becoming an ugly spider caused her to flail her legs wildly in a hysterical frenzy. She was saved from the sharp paws by a tall man in a classic suit and a monocle over one eye, who showed courage and determination at a critical moment. Holding Miss Ain's hand, the boy advised her to remain calm and watch her behavior carefully if she wanted to remain charming. Finally letting her go, the gentleman smiled sweetly and added that it was easy to disappoint his chosen one with his frivolity. Spider apologized to Lord Lead and Ichiru for her inability to control her emotions in a moment of anger. The man approached the pharmacist, handing her a piece of paper with a prescription for the potion he needed to purchase. Left alone while the healer went to look for a potion, Lord Led coughed to the side, trying to contain himself and not attract unnecessary attention. Carefully examining her new acquaintance, Futaba noticed all the signs that the young man had been affected by the black sand. When Lead, suddenly weakened and staggering from weakness in his legs, began to lose his balance, the girl immediately rushed to his side to support him and prevent his fall. With his head bowed in humility, the gentleman asked the sweet lady's forgiveness with sincere regret for having caused her trouble. Watching this sweet conversation with a displeased look, Ain called Led a real ladies' man, which made him cough even more from embarrassment. Futaba was absolutely delighted and incredibly surprised when, as a generous reward for her beautiful roses, she was given a large bag of money. Enchanted, the girl looked at the clearing covered with many wilted flowers, realizing that this was her chance to earn money from a magical assessment that could change fate. On the table stood a cup of aromatic tea, to which was added the Rosetta potion, which gave the color of magical properties a magical effect. Sitting at the table in a snow-white dress and with glowing skin, Lady Ain noticed that an unusual lightness had arisen in her body, which she had never experienced before. The shop owner gratefully accepted the bag of flowers from Ichiru, asking if he had visited the Holy Lands by chance to verify the authenticity of his gift. Having convinced the shop owner that he had not visited the Holy Lands and thus had not violated any regulations, Futaba was pleased to receive his well-deserved reward in the form of money. Shitori watched in amazement as the beautiful roses bloomed and gave off a wonderful scent thanks to the lady's generous gift. Laughing at the wolf cub's careless words, Futaba reminded him with a slight grin that no one should know about her secret power, so that the lady could keep this secret completely safe and avoid unnecessary attention. Putting her finger to her lips, Ichiru also added that Hisui shouldn't have known about the girl's flowers and business. Hearing that this was to remain a secret from her husband and his mistress, the werewolf became lost in thought, carefully considering how much this proposal could affect the current situation. An image arose in the beast's mind in which he was the winner, and the evil dragon was the loser in the battle for the girl's attention, which gave rise to a feeling of pride and satisfaction in him. Pleased, Shitori threw himself into Ichiru's arms, swearing to keep her secret and not reveal it to anyone. The magical creatures were actively discussing the new potion, which colored the mane much better than the previous roslet, admiring the improved properties and effect. The dark-colored cat with matted fur also wanted to try the new product if it was risk-free and would not cause harm. Shocked by the influx of customers, the store owner stood and listened to their requests, which concerned the purchase of the new potion in various sizes and quantities. Smiling sheepishly, she politely asked all customers to wait a few seconds so that she could organize and prepare a new shampoo for each one. Ichiru stood there, listening intently as he told her in detail how, with her help, Roslet had become the best and most sought-after medicine in their empire. She enjoyed hearing praise for herself, knowing that her efforts and hard work were appreciated and recognized. The huge, fluffy cat greeted new customers as he entered his cafe with grace and a friendly smile. Following the fluffiness definition level, this monster received the seal of approval from Futaba for the incredible softness of its fur, which was highly praised. Even in this cozy place where the girl came to enjoy a cup of tea, everyone around was only discussing a new potion that could work real miracles. 3 rabbits sitting at a nearby table were happily grabbing each other's soft bangs and fluffy hair, creating a funny and lively atmosphere. The orphan covered her mouth with her hand when she heard visitors calling her herbs healing and herself a holy virgin, surprised and embarrassed by such an unexpected confession. A large cat, with grace and coziness, served a cup of aromatic tea to the establishment's new guest, who had settled down at the bar counter near the kitchen. The man turned out to be Lord Led, who was examining the new cup of tea with distrust, doubting its healing properties. His gaze was full of caution and skepticism. Looking down and showing doubt in the positive feedback, he thoughtfully immersed himself in his thoughts, pondering possible hidden aspects and his own experiences. Pleased with the results of her magic, Futaba couldn't help but smile when she saw the graceful and fluffy creatures with soft fur that filled her with genuine admiration. She wanted to pass the medical examination and assessment as soon as possible so that she could become the Empire's healer and give healing to all the monsters, ensuring their health and well-being. The shop owner told Ichiru that recently an investigator and a pharmacist from the palace came into her shop, interested in buying the magical roses and willing to pay well for them. Unfortunately, the scent of the flowers slowly faded, and the magical creatures began to return to their normal black fur color, remaining willing to wait for a new potion for years. Noticing the strangely good mood of his housemate, Hisui wanted to find out the reason for this change and understand what could have caused such a joyful state. Leaning over Ichiru, asking for her attention, the boy asked for a moment to discuss an important and urgent matter that required her participation and attention. With his arms folded across his chest, the sage asked the orphan if she had anything important to tell him or anything she wanted to share with him. When he answered in the negative, the dragon, holding back his displeasure, picked up the rose he had gotten from Fuku and grabbed the rabbit by the ears, interrogating him to find out where he could have gotten this mysterious plant. Unwilling to admit her guilt, the girl vehemently denied the accusations and said that she did not use magic on the roses, insisting on her innocence. The cold gaze of green eyes radiated mistrust and malice, revealing internal irritation from lies and insincerity. Hisui already knew that she was lying to him and healing flowers at her own discretion, so he decided to punish her by setting a rule that she would have to give half of her earnings as a healer. Expecting the worst punishment, the lady was pleasantly surprised to learn that she would only have to give the money without losing her memory or facing more serious consequences. From now on, the orphan had to discuss such issues with the dragon without exception, following the established rules and avoiding independent decisions. Placing his hand on the maiden's head, the werewolf asked her to hide nothing from him anymore and gave her a rose as a gift. After the conversation, putting on a warm cape, Ichiru headed into the forest to do her business and deal with the necessary tasks. As soon as she found herself in the forest, her attention was drawn to an unexpected voice coming from the side, which aroused her curiosity. There, tangled in her dark fur coat and hanging from a branch, was Lady Ain, in desperate need of outside help and rescue. In her defense, the lady explained that her dark fur coat was firmly stuck to the web, and she could not get out of this difficult situation on her own. Recognizing the lady from the store, Ichiru resolutely went to her rescue, carefully examining the complex tangled threads to find a way to free her. But then suddenly Ain turned around in fear, noticing that a sad rain was approaching, dangerous for magical creatures, which could seriously threaten their safety. They had to hurry if they didn't want the web to be turned to dust by the coming rain. Time was running out. In fear for her life, the aristocrat turned away, not wanting to face the inevitable death and the difficulties ahead. But then Ichiru extended her hand, and the magic flowing from it flowed through the space, forming a magical glow. White sparkles sparkling in the air surrounded the monster, creating a kind of barrier between it and the approaching sand, protecting it from danger. When the spider opened her eyes in surprise, she realized that she had been saved by the healer and felt deep gratitude for her help. The monster's paws turned snow-white and completely healed, sparkling with purity. At the same time, the web cracked, and Lady Ain began to fall steadily, heading straight for Ichiru. Naturally, the nobleman noticed how her body had changed, seeing that it had acquired a new shape and gotten rid of its previous flaws. Then, out of nowhere, a man in a cloak appeared, interrupting the conversation and attracting the attention of the girls with his sudden appearance. Futaba turned around, noticing Hisui's presence, and stared at him in confusion, not understanding what he was doing in this place. Placing a hand on her cheek, the elegant Ain greeted the dragon, pleasantly surprised to meet such a familiar and strange creature. The large reptile also greeted the spider as if she were an old friend, in a word, displaying a friendly manner of communication. Slightly embarrassed, Ichiru sat with her eyes downcast, listening to the loud sobs that broke the silence and created an awkward atmosphere. Next to her sat a lady who did not believe that she would ever meet a dragon again after all that had happened, but here they were, the three of them, sitting at the same table. After greeting the dragon's companion, the lady introduced herself as Ain Arachne Pruins, the Marquis's eldest daughter, who was pleased to meet the healer. The orphan immediately began to bow to the spider, recognizing her as the daughter of the Marquis to whom the entire city belonged. The aristocrat, however, did not particularly like formalities. Despite Ain's youthful appearance, she was clearly older than Ichiru. Moreover, the noble lady was very grateful to Futaba for saving her, expressing her sincere appreciation for the help he had given her. Despite her appearance, the spider was a knight who defended the empire in difficult times, showing fortitude and courage in difficult situations. Indeed, Hisui said that he carried out orders as a knight, but the fact that he lived in the palace was unknown. In his past life, the dragon was a handsome and brave knight named Hisui Luvan Lui, also known as Dragon Blade. Radiating a subtle beauty and hovering in the sky above the battlefield, he resembled a deity of war from a painting, with a majestic appearance and a graceful figure that captivated with his presence. Lady Ain sheepishly recalled how the dragon fought so well in battles and struck down villains with his sword, admiring his skill and bravery. The ladies of the court immediately fell on their faces when they saw the majestic man, and were left with broken hearts, amazed by his amazing presence. Ichiru could only imagine how magnificent he looked in the armor, picturing him in its brilliance and grace that highlighted his courage and strength. Interrupting the ladies' conversation, the lord stated that he was grateful to the Marquis for protecting the area from visits by bulky residents, and apologized for not being able to come and express his gratitude to Ain earlier. And drinking precious tea, personally brewed by the Marquise's daughter, was the highest reward for the former knight, symbolizing recognition and respect. Smiling, the aristocrat promised that she would forever keep in the depths of her soul the healer's brave act, which left a deep mark on her heart. Indeed, the spider was a wonderful girl, fully worthy of her title, displaying all the qualities that could be expected from such a title. When the lid of the teapot was opened, it became clear that the tea was already finished, which caused no small amount of regret. Hisui took over the task of making tea, leaving the two girls alone so they could continue their conversation without his interference. Left alone, Ain decided to ask Futaba about what exactly happened at the pharmacy in order to get to the bottom of the events. It was not difficult for the sweet lady to guess that it was Ichiru who brought those roses to create the roselet potion, given all the circumstances and details of what happened. The orphan immediately began to refuse any reward from the noble lady, claiming that she did not need anything and did not want to accept anything in gratitude. At this point, the healer had a great idea that she could accept the reward as a thank you. With her head down, Ichiru awkwardly admitted that she had saved up quite a large sum of money to learn healing, but had encountered problems in the process. Having accepted the humble girl's request, the noblewoman offered her help to cover the cost of tuition and was ready to write a letter of recommendation that could significantly ease her path to her goal. Moreover, she had a person in her house who could evaluate her magical abilities for free and provide a qualified expert opinion, which was of great value. Smiling gratefully, Ichiru was ready to approach him, but before that they needed to discuss all the details with the Dragon Lord to be sure that their actions were correct. The wind blew, giving a pleasant feeling. Standing next to Futaba, the spider said that thanks to her power, a miracle would happen to the magical creatures who would be healed. Lord Led laughed when he learned that the healer was only 15 years old, which irritated Ain. He considered her age to be insufficient for such a level of skill. The nobleman said that in that case, Futaba had a less powerful but unique magic that had its own special character. He had his doubts that the girl would be able to heal her, but he was willing to conduct an assessment of her powers to find out how effective her magic was. Standing in the forest, the dragon and his companion said goodbye to the spider, expressing gratitude for her help and support before continuing their journey. Suddenly, they were joined by another man named Makoto, who had brown hair and was dressed in an officer's uniform. Makoto gently grabbed Lady Ain, telling her how much the Marquis had worried and stressed during her absence, emphasizing how important her safety and return was. Seeing that they were not alone, Mr. Lapin introduced himself by his full name and lover, Ain, trying to show respect and courtesy. Together, the two lovers left the dragon and Ichiru, leaving them in the forest to continue their journey. The young man looked truly handsome and happy in the company of the aristocrat, radiating light and joy from their communication and closeness. Futaba watched them walk away thoughtfully, thinking about the events that led up to this moment. Hisui rubbed his neck tiredly, annoyed at how his companion was constantly getting into trouble, which led to him constantly worrying. The boy turned to Ichiru when she asked if he was going to return to his dragon form, wondering about his future plans and intentions. In response, the girl did not receive a precise answer, but only heard that the dragon was going to take a nap, leaving her slightly perplexed. When the orphan girl admitted that she wanted to enjoy his scent, the man approached her and put his arm around her, immersing her in his warm embrace. Moving closer to her ear, he whispered something barely audible and called her a pervert, causing her to become embarrassed and her cheeks to blush. The girl glanced awkwardly at the dragon and noticed that he immediately turned away, hiding his smile. A barely perceptible laugh escaped his mouth, which he tried to hide by covering his lips with his hand, but the sparks of mirth betrayed his true mood. Calling Ichiru a willful girl, he began to walk away, leaving her standing there in thought. Lying quietly on the magical creature's fluffy fur, the girl was clearly disturbing him. If she wanted to sleep, she should go home. The girl stood in the dense forest, wrapped in her warm cape, and greeted her acquaintance with a slight smile, feeling the soft breeze gently touch her face. Hisui himself invited the little lady to come with him to the new home, creating a warm and friendly atmosphere for their upcoming time together. The dragon's clawed paw appeared on the opposite side of the past night, as if a reminder of how much his path and destiny had changed. Against the backdrop of the enormous creature, Futaba looked tiny and fragile, like a fleeting petal in the shadow of a giant tree. But instead of fear, the lady only smiled, calling him a giant fluffy thing, which gave his gaze an extraordinary lightness. Hugging the large beast, she tenderly stroked its green and light fur, feeling how its warmth and softness enveloped the lady. As Ichiru woke up, she noticed that she was no longer lying on top of the large creature. Instead, she was being held carefully in the arms of a man who was carefully lifting the girl up. Sleepily opening her eyes, she asked what was going on around her, and the guy replied that the strong wind was dangerous to people's health. Trying her best not to fall asleep, Futaba tried to stay awake as she was carried inside, clinging close to the dragon. A few days later, a messenger pigeon arrived, carrying not only an elegantly wrapped gift, but also a formal invitation to tea, which Ain had kindly sent. As Ichiru gazed with delight and admiration at the elegant new dresses and exquisite accessories, she noticed that among the gifts were carefully selected presents for Shitori. The wolf cub complimented Ichiru when she tried on a new cape made from fine spider threads and was impressed by its exquisite appearance. Futaba was incredibly happy to receive a pink note from her new monster friend, who turned out to be a real source of joy and amazing surprises. Before going to visit the aristocrat, the girl received instructions from the dragon and words of comfort that helped her feel confident. In her new green dress with a pink bow, Ichiru looked incredibly cute and lovely, like a living picture from a fairy tale. Lifting the young lady's chin, Hisui gave her a sincere compliment, admiring her elegant new outfit and impeccable taste that perfectly highlighted her refined beauty. After this, the dragon tenderly hugged the girl and with sincere warmth wished her good luck in her future adventures. Futaba couldn't hide her smile as she said goodbye to the owner of the house and expressed her gratitude for the warm welcome. But in the distant past, Hisui also smiled, and his loyal friends, as a sign of special affection and closeness, briefly called the dragon Hisum, which gave their relationship an informal touch. His friend openly told Hisui that he was too close to Malu, and that this was the reason for the subsequent events for which he blamed him. The young man turned around abruptly, startled by an unexpected loud cry that came from very close by. The happy rabbit bounced around the floor, clutching a large, juicy apple tightly in his paws. Fuku was eagerly awaiting the moment to eat the sweet fruit. After throwing the hare against the wall, Hisui deftly took the apple from Fuku. This unexpected action was so swift that the rabbit was left confused. The beautiful estate was huge and majestic, attracting the attention of everyone who passed by with its luxurious architecture and well-kept appearance. It was truly a surprising coincidence that Lead was the very person who was supposed to evaluate magical abilities. He was already eagerly awaiting Ichiru's arrival, preparing to evaluate her talent. Finally, he was given the honor of introducing himself as Imperial Diplomat Zurko Lead, who was forced to remain here for personal reasons despite his high positions and important duties. Thoughtfully, Zurko leaned closer to the girl, carefully studying her purple, unusual eyes, as if trying to unravel their deep secrets and hidden emotions. Laughing, the Lord compared them to amethysts, emphasizing how mysterious and magnificent these violet eyes were, as if full of precious sparkle. Sitting down in a comfortable chair, Lead warned that everything said here must remain strictly within the confines of this room to ensure the confidentiality and safety of the discussion. After that, he asked to extend his hand over his hand for diagnostics in order to conduct a thorough analysis and assessment of the state of magic. As soon as their fingers touched, green sparks instantly appeared between them, sparkling and shimmering. Magical energy began to fill the space. Lead, with obvious surprise, recoiled when he felt an unpleasant and at the same time tense sensation emanating from the unexpected and mystical phenomenon. In front of Led, shining with an ancient light created by powerful magic to provide impenetrable protection and create a barrier around him. It turned out that such magic was a wind attribute that Ichiru did not possess, meaning that the shield was created by someone else with the appropriate magical power and abilities. The girl thought about it, and immediately Hisui came to her mind as a possible owner of this attribute. After all, he was a dragon. Putting a finger to his lips and looking up with a slight tremor of surprise, Zurko admitted that he himself was not capable of creating such an incredibly powerful barrier. There was a note of envy in his voice. Politely, and with a subtle touch of respect, the Lord asked if it was possible for him to break the wards without compromising their integrity. He had no intention of doing so by force. Ichiru considered the offer, pleased to see that the path to the dragon was open. After some thought, she agreed. Feeling delighted, Lead recalled the past when he had said the opposite, filled with fear of the wielder of magic. Then his words were full of hesitation and horror. Even as a young boy, Zurko regretted his association with the dragon, realizing all the dangers and consequences that came with that decision. The Lord standing before him was covered in bandages and black sand, reminders of his terrible ordeal, and the boy cursed his once best friend, bitterly remembering their past friendship. Recognizing the signature of the magic, Lead realized that Hisui was still alive. This realization left him with mixed feelings. With a fiery explosion, the barrier of green magic was broken through. An instant flash of destructive force tore apart the magical field. When Milady's hand touched Zurko, he encountered no resistance, and this soft touch seemed to dispel all barriers, leaving a feeling of lightness and relief. Touching the young Ichiru, the man felt something strange and at the same time mesmerizing. Invisible magic, permeated with extraordinary purity and innocence. Looking up, the girl admitted that she could remove sand from other magical creatures. The orphan's words were full of confidence, and there was a note of pride in her abilities in her voice. Lead listened in fascination as she explained that she could also change the trajectory of a falling object, doing something that seemed completely impossible. After her speech, Futaba added that she dreams of becoming a healer and saving other monsters, the healer's words reflecting genuine concern and a desire to bring light and hope to those in need. Pointing his finger upward, the man asked Ichiru to demonstrate her abilities, expecting to see her magical prowess and skills. Soon a ball of light appeared in the orphan's palms, emitting a soft glow that filled the room with warmth and magic. This sight strongly reminded the Lord of the healer girl who previously had a similar healing ability, creating similar glowing spheres. Instantly raising his hand and raising his voice, the man insistently demanded that Ichiru stop her actions immediately, emphasizing the seriousness of his demand. After this, Zurko suddenly found himself in the grip of a painful coughing fit, which, despite all his efforts to hide it, continued to shake his body restlessly. Ichiru began to worry about Lead's well-being, but he simply brushed it off, explaining that the medicine had run out and there was nothing serious at the moment. Ultimately, it was concluded that Futaba possessed the rarest and most noble gift of all, which made her extremely unique and valuable. Zurko, feeling tired, suggested breaking the evaluation process into several stages. While they were working through this, it became clear that Ichiru had the gift of healing. Once it is finally established that Ichiru truly has the gift of healing, Lead will immediately contact the palace's chief manager, who will in turn issue the girl an official healer's license. Immediately after this, the orphan, filled with deep gratitude and awe, sincerely expressed her gratitude to the Lord for his help and immeasurable support. Moreover, the Lord, deeply touched by her sincerity and noble humility, decided to give her a special gift to express his gratitude. The gift turned out to be a memory mirror, a compact and elegant device that could record short videos of the owner's memories, allowing important moments to be preserved. Ichiru looked with admiration and awe at the memory mirror that would allow her to record her use of magic and then pass it on to Led. When asked if the healer could have cured Zirko, he responded by citing the problems associated with this type of magic that could have interfered. However, the nobleman hastened to reassure the lady, assuring her that as soon as he took the medicine, his condition would improve significantly and everything would soon be fine. A man's hand came up to repair the damage done to the shield, working carefully and deliberately to restore it to its original state. And so, after a few moments, the green barrier was as good as new again, shining with renewed strength and restored protection. There were many sweets and cakes on the table, abundant in a variety of tastes and aromas, which created a real atmosphere of festive abundance. With a warm and kind smile, Ain informed that Futaba had put in a lot of effort and shown real dedication today. Now it was time for a well-deserved rest. The eyes of the girl from Shitori literally sparkled with delight at the sight of many delicacies, which made the hostess of the event laugh, as she could not help but notice and appreciate this sincere joy. In passing, the spider added that she had decided to invest in the development of a new bottling plant in the capital, which deeply surprised Ichiru. She sighed, lost in memories of her beloved Ain, who had left an indelible impression on her as an extremely kind and noble man. Makoto was a human, and despite her frightening second form, in which she was a spider, the lady still remained an object of deep and sincere love for him. As she sadly recalled, Futaba realized the bitter truth. The lifespan of magical creatures was extremely short, as most of them died due to the destructive sand rain. The new roselet not only gave the lovers confidence and faith in a bright future, but also inspired Ain to overcome her fears and openly respond to Makoto with mutual love, accepting his feelings. The spider, smiling, expressed her firm desire to begin selling the new potion as soon as possible, which the lady considered especially valuable and promising. Blushing in embarrassment, Ichiru realized that her feelings were just as deep and sincere as Ain's, causing a wave of awkwardness and surprise to flow through her. During tea, the spider insistently declared that she wanted to discuss something important with her friend. This required full attention and a serious approach. The wolf cub also pricked up his ears warily as soon as the conversation turned to love, showing obvious interest in the topic under discussion. Ichiru couldn't help but laugh, admitting that she was simply thinking about the complex and multifaceted relationship between Ain and Makoto. The thought brought a slight smile and a peaceful mood to her. The aristocrat expressed her point of view clearly, explaining that her opinion was based on personal experience and observation, while Futaba, being still young, was just beginning to form her views. But the orphan girl really did constantly look for Hisui and was happy when she noticed him, experiencing a deep sense of satisfaction. With her mouth slightly open in surprise, Ichiru realized that her heart was starting to beat faster at the sight of the green dragon, causing her to feel a storm of emotions and excitement. Unable to get rid of the affair, the girl compared all the signs of falling in love, and, to her surprise, discovered that they coincided with her own feelings. Shitori, raising his ears up, also compared the signs of love and looked at his mistress with love. The man's strong legs, covered in sand, stood on the shower floor, freeing themselves from the traces of a hard day and enjoying the cool stream of water. Hisui tried to wash away the black sand grains that stubbornly remained on his skin despite all his efforts. Every time the guy thought he had succeeded, those annoying marks returned. As the dragon descended, he noticed his neighbor returning home with the boy they had recently rescued, and the sight filled his heart with joy. The monster greeted them briefly, and to his relief there was no trace of the grains of sand he had carefully tried to hide on his body. It was a secret. In addition, Hisui took a discreet glance at the protective shield he had set up earlier, checking if everything was okay with it. The long and intense gaze puzzled the girl, causing her to feel deeply embarrassed and internally anxious due to the unexpected and unusual attention. Ichiru, tightly hugging Shitori's shoulder, quickly pulled her away, saying as she ran that they were going to take a bath to relax and rest a bit. Hisui's face showed genuine surprise as he witnessed the strange departure of the girl with the wolf cub. Additionally, as time went on, the dragon noticed that Futaba was acting extremely strange, appearing overly cheerful and clearly out of character. The girl explained her behavior by the fact that, together with Ain, they decided to stop the endless sand rain, which created many difficulties and caused a lot of problems. During the meeting with the spider, they discussed that if the stones and Ichiru's magic were combined, it might be possible to stop the endless sand falling on the city, which threatened to destroy it. The grateful lady reported that during her rescue, the healer also redirected the rain, changing its trajectory. And now, as the next marquise and head of the family, she would like to try a way to protect magical creatures, if one exists, and minimize any potential consequences. Hisui's face darkened as he read the letter from the marquise. The previous night was indebted to her, and this added to the gravity of the situation. Ichiru tried to convince the dragon that now, more than ever, was the time to find out the limits of his abilities and his true strength. The werewolf made his condition. He would accompany her throughout her journey, providing the necessary support and protection to ensure her safety. The feet stood firmly on the floor, without trembling or giving in to the slightest movement. This was Lord Lid, a courageous and noble warrior, standing firm against the dark side that constantly questioned his loyalty and resolve, his face, despite all the trials, retaining an expression of determination. The purple butterflies whispered in his ear that the holy war had been stopped, and they, with deep regret, resigned themselves to the existence of the cursed magical creatures that continued to darken the world. But the dragons irritated the purple butterflies the most, because these powerful creatures, like inescapable shadows, doomed them to an eternal existence here. Sitting on the sofa in her white uniform and deep in thought, Ain made a decisive decision to use the magic stone Fragile to stop the endless flow of sand that threatened to swallow everything around. This gemstone was blue in color, symbolizing innocence. It could be infused with magic, and after a few activations, it would turn to dust. The trio, comfortably settled in the living room, came to the conclusion that after activation, the stone invariably turned into a useless trinket, losing all its value. These magical stones will be installed at the highest points of the city and will be activated during rain. The idea is to absorb sand in the air before it falls to the ground. She went on to talk forcefully about how the lives of residents who have suffered from the cumulative effect of sand over many years would be greatly improved by such a device. And Ichiru will stand on the roof of the largest building and act as a magic activator to ensure the efficient functioning of the system. The dragon immediately objected, emphasizing that by taking on the role of a magic activator, the healer would become a focus of magical powers, and one should not expect the impossible from her, because her capabilities are not limitless. Aine agreed with the dragon's wise words, feeling deeply grateful for Hisui's care for Futaba, and was touched by the attention and support. The dragon's military uniform looked magnificent. A white uniform with golden shoulder pads gave him an appearance of grandeur and strength, and also emphasized his masculinity and majesty. Returning his piercing gaze to Ichiru, the dragon sternly ordered her not to overexert herself too much during the test, warning her of possible dangers. The summer residence was several times larger than the Hisui house, and in its grandeur and scope resembled a real imperial palace, radiating grandeur and elegance. Two workers were walking along the road, discussing Lady Spider and her foolish intentions of using the Fragile stone for some trifle, which seemed inappropriate and ridiculous to them. One of the men pushing the cart told his friend that there was no point in stopping the rain as it would be a wasted effort. As their feet moved forward, they discussed how they should start settling the different species. Since humans and monsters were too different, the death of monsters due to the constant sand was of little interest to anyone. The workers considered magical creatures to be sinful, believing that their presence disrupted the natural order and harmony of the world, causing unrest and discontent among people. A mysterious cloaked figure stopped nearby, as if emerging from the shadows, and its presence enveloped everything around with an enigmatic feeling. Wanting to stand up for all magical creatures, Ichiru was stopped by a hand grab that interrupted the woman's intentions and made the girl freeze. Hisui stopped the healer, noting that her actions would most likely only add fuel to the fire and would not bring any benefit, but would only worsen the situation without improving the situation for anyone. A maid was already waiting for them at the entrance, who politely greeted the guests, inviting them into the estate with a friendly gesture. The orphan had long since firmly decided to stop the torment of magical creatures and protect her friends. She felt strength and determination within herself. With a slight trepidation, the girl opened the massive oak doors leading to the mysterious mansion. Stepping inside, the lady felt the cold air envelop her. Outside, it was just starting to rain glowing sand, which gently settled on the ground, giving everything around a magical, almost unreal look. The poor little animal, having felt the first grains of glowing sand, immediately put on its hood and rushed away, escaping from an unusual natural disaster. However, when it seemed that danger would not come, the cute creature raised its head to the sky in surprise, unable to understand what was happening around it. All the other non-humans also stopped in place, throwing their cloaks over their heads as protection. They stood waiting, but the rain did not start. On the roof of a large building, a bright magic ball shone, illuminating the surroundings with a soft, mystical light, as if inviting everyone to admire its mysterious beauty. In the very center of the sphere was a majestic and shining gemstone of a rich blue color, whose magnificence was breathtaking and eye-catching. With wide eyes, Ichiru looked at the magic scepter, with which the orphan could control the trajectory of the rain, directing its streams in the desired direction. Turning to his friend, Futaba explained in detail that thanks to Ani's magic staff, her magic powers do not deplete quickly. This allows her to use them for a long time. Using a magic scepter not only made it easier to control magic, allowing it to be directed with greater precision, but also made the process of purposeful use of spells much easier and more effective. A joyful Ichiru agreed with a smile that she felt great, enjoying every moment and being glad that everything was going the way she dreamed. A mysterious figure in a dark cloak watched everything that was happening from afar, hidden by thick shadows and remaining unnoticed, as if the night itself was covering the man with its mysterious veil. It was Mistress Spider, amazed by the power of the healer who came from nowhere. The abilities of this mysterious healer were truly incredible. Quietly, as if afraid to disturb the magical moment, Ain whispered that finally the rain that had not been stopped for centuries had stopped. Ain couldn't hold back her tears of joy, because now she and Makoto could be together for the rest of their lives, enjoying every minute that fate had given them, and building a future together full of happiness and mutual love. All this time she stood on the balcony, surrounded by a majestic forest, whose dense crowns, like a living shield, protected them from the outside world. The air was filled with the aroma of freshness. Having previously condemned the spider, the workers froze in surprise when they saw that Fragir had actually managed to make the sand stop. No one believed in the success of the orphan's idea. The citizen of order had been watching the people all this time, who were discussing their mistress and her stupid lover behind their backs, convinced that they could not be a couple. When Makoto came out into the light, he stated that he never wanted to cause his beloved one bit of suffering. Lapkin emphasized that it was unforgivable for two men to judge a noble lady. The peasants, desperately trying to justify themselves and prove their innocence, began to put forward arguments in their defense, but the officer and his assistants firmly decided to send them to jail. The fact of the crime was irrefutable. The insult to the honor of Her Excellency left no room for doubt. Ichiru continued to diligently accumulate energy and skillfully manipulate the sand. The orphan's strength was running out, and with each passing moment it became more and more difficult to cope with the increasing load. Time continued its inexorable march, and her legs, feeling the increasing heaviness, began to give way and tremble, as if every minute brought her closer to the limit of her physical capabilities. Realizing that her legs could no longer support her, Hisui walked over and stopped Ichiru, gently telling her that that was enough for today. There was a limit to everything. The animals soon noticed one particular building that seemed to magically attract and collect most of the rain, like a magnet attracting sand. Since the creatures were below, they could not see who was standing above and was responsible for their salvation. They could only guess who this mysterious hero was. One of the gray rabbits, gathering his courage, loudly expressed his gratitude to their mysterious savior. Words filled with sincere appreciation echoed throughout the area. After him, both the little goat with a horn on its forehead and the majestic big cat who was the owner of the cafe expressed their words of gratitude. With her mouth open, Futaba stood on the rooftop, accepting the compliments and thanks, surprised by the attention and appreciation that was directed her way. The girl immediately realized that she was being hugged by a dragon, which slowly detached itself and retreated. Hisui gave her his protection, surrounding her with care and warmth, like a caring guard. When the lady worried that someone might notice them, the reptile hastened to assure her that because of the barrier, outsiders could not recognize the identities of strangers. Finally, after a long and dramatic separation from Ichiru, the former knight, full of regret and nostalgia, approached her with a request to return his staff to him. The orphan, all red with embarrassment, drowning in her sad thoughts and worries, did not offer much resistance, as if her inner experiences and worries had entangled her, depriving her of strength and the desire to fight. This made the dragon chuckle. He couldn't help but smile as he noticed that the little orphan, all red with embarrassment, resembled a bright, ripe tomato that had lain in the sun for too long. Wanting to express his sincere feelings and care, Hisui gently touched his lips to her forehead, giving a soft kiss that was full of tenderness. After this, the dragon, demonstrating amazing lightness and grace, slowly walked away with the magic scepter, leaving the girl alone. So the man tried his best to hide his blush, but despite all his efforts, his face still flushed. The city was in a festive mood, bright flags were fluttering everywhere, elegant tents were erected, and monsters were happily celebrating the long-awaited end to the endless reign. Together with Shitori, the orphan went on a leisurely walk through the busy streets of the city, constantly asking him if he wanted a snack. Aine, excitedly throwing herself into Futaba's arms, with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, shouted out her boundless gratitude, her words filled with sincere appreciation and deep feeling. The Marchioness was truly happy. She happily entered into a contract with Ichiru to regularly enchant blue stones. The rabbit was happily engaged in a lively discussion with the other bunnies, debating whether it was worth continuing to wear the old worn-out robe or whether it was time to move on to new clothes. The mice danced happily in the square, surrounded by twinkling lights, and happily agreed to keep the secret of Lady Aine, uniting in their desire to protect her secret. Futaba watched with genuine joy as the animals seemed not only happy, but also full of vitality. To please Hisui, the girl decided to choose a gift for him at the fair, where she went accompanied by a cute and playful wolf cub. Shitori frowned upon hearing the dragon's name, and jealousy instantly filled the werewolf like a dark cloud enveloping his mind and heart. He experienced all the signs of love, which the spider listed to him with such precision and insight that now he could not help but realize his true feelings for his mistress. Cursing the stupid reptile, the boy fell into a deep sadness, staring out the window and letting his thoughts wander to memories of the happy days spent with Ichiru. Shitori frowned, deciding not to have any more stupid pets. Now he could fully focus on helping his owner. Turning to Futaba, the little wolf cub called her name, catching her attention and making her wonder what secret intentions he might be hiding behind that simple gesture. Shitori opened his eyes and began to talk about his feelings to Ichiru, his voice shaking with emotion but sounding sincere. Flashing his sharp fangs in the light of the fires, the werewolf loudly added that he liked this girl more than all the others, emphasizing his affection and admiration, which he could not hide. The boy's hand grabbed the healer's hand tightly, and at that moment the wolf cub realized that in order to help her, he also had to learn magic. The night sky was shimmering with thousands of stars, each of which added its own shining touch to this enchanting and magical landscape, creating an unforgettable spectacle. In the darkness of the veranda, with only the distant stars as light, Hisui sat at the table, with only a bottle of drink for company, lost in his thoughts and enjoying the solitude. Then, as the dragon watched the girl, Hisui realized that he had underestimated her all this time. Once he saw her amazing healing abilities, he could no longer take his eyes off her. Realizing that this path was dangerous, the man took a glass of drink in his hand, which was supposed to help him forget and distract himself from disturbing thoughts for a moment. The werewolf drained the entire glass in one gulp, enjoying every moment as if it were the last sip of his life. Throughout the majestic, snow-white imperial palace decorated with sparkling blue domes, rumors were spreading about the imminent end of the mysterious sand rain and about the fate of magical creatures. The one who ruled the entire empire walked majestically through the hall. The sound of her soles echoed throughout the room, filling the space with a special solemnity and grandeur, emphasizing the high position of the person. The aristocrats loudly and unanimously greeted the son of the empire, a woman with a magnificent red cape decorated with expensive fur falling over her shoulders. In response, the head of the empire expressed her gratitude and spoke inspiring words calling for universal glory and prosperity so that every citizen would feel proud and confident in the future. The council of nobles sat down at a long table. Everyone around already knew that the stopping of time, like an hourglass, had occurred on the initiative of the Marquise of Ain. Having listened to her subjects, the Empress came to the conclusion that it would be necessary to communicate with the hero of the occasion. So that the rumors would not spread further, she ordered that the Marquis of Prunes be invited to the palace as soon as possible. Smiling slyly, the Empress, with her light hair, like gold, expressed her hopes that the Marquise would tell them everything and share her secret with them. Quietly on his bed, not disturbing anyone, plunging into sweet dreams, his thoughts constantly returned to his housemate. When asked what kind of diplomat he was, Ichiru replied that he was a very polite man and was an important person. The only problem was the illegible name of the magic appraiser. There was something wrong with the seal, too. It was completely green, but in the center there was a strange yellow mark that stood out and attracted attention. The next moment, this symbol flared up brightly with fire, burning everything around and creating the feeling that the air itself began to crackle and melt from the unbearable heat. Hisui flinched in fear, his eyes wide open. The boy's gaze was filled with horror, and black sand began to appear on his skin, absorbing his body and space. Finally, a long-forgotten name emerged from the depths of her memory. Futaba confidently told him that the diplomat's name was Zurko Lead, and her voice trembled with excitement, as if the name had magical powers. Jumping up from the cozy, warm bed, the dragon headed towards the massive wooden table, on which lay a small, inconspicuous mirror, reflecting the reflections of the morning light. As if from nowhere, Zurko suddenly appeared, engulfed in flames. He greeted the dragon, adding that it looked quite good. With his dangerous green eyes flashing, the werewolf asked rudely what exactly Led was planning, the man's voice sounding like a growl, instilling fear and trembling in anyone who dared to contradict him. Lead hastened to calm the rude man down, explaining that Lady Ain had personally asked the diplomat to investigate Ichiru's magic and not to go beyond that assignment. Before disappearing completely into flames, Zirko explained that he was going to tell the Empress about a healer who possessed unique abilities. Her Majesty has always had a deep respect for holy magic, revering it much more than all other types of magic, admiring its purity and power. The Lord insisted that the healer's magic should be used for the benefit of all magical creatures. Protecting and supporting the maiden was a task for adults. Standing in front of his former friend, Zurko admitted with impudence and doubt in his voice that he had always considered him unworthy of Ichiru, openly expressing his disdain and dissatisfaction. Bowing his head down, the man added that Hisui seemed to use magic as a shackle for the maiden, chaining her to himself with his charms. The dragon, being a narcissistic egoist, cared only about his own desires. After ordering everyone present to remain silent, Hisui watched intently as the imperial diplomat slowly dissolved into thin air and the fire disappeared. The werewolf, filled with rage, grabbed the window and smashed it with all his might, scattering the glass into hundreds of glittering shards that scattered across the room. The fair-haired boy stood in front of me, dressed in a snow-white knight's cloak, radiating calmness and confidence. Came out to meet him, surrounded by a multitude of small creatures that resembled animated dust balls. These mysterious creatures did not want to leave the holy maiden's side at all. Hisui, with surprise and a slight note of bewilderment in his voice, asked why she had brought such a huge number of Kasaran Pasaran with her. Futaba awkwardly replied that these mysterious creatures had fallen on her. The dragon, with the help of a powerful gust of wind, removed most of the cute monsters and carefully removed the remaining ones from the lady's hair with his clawed paws. Confused and at a loss, Ichiru stood there, unsure of how to properly react to what was happening around her, the furry creatures still remaining on her lip. Hisui, eager to remind himself of his true form as a monster, turned to the healer with the confidence that she could forget about his situation. One of his fingers carefully and gently approached the fluffy lump stuck on Futaba's face, as if he was afraid of causing her discomfort. The werewolf asked his companion to remain silent so that he could fully concentrate on the task at hand and help her thoroughly clean up the trash. The couple's faces were so close to each other that one could feel the warmth of their breath, which was like a soft whisper touching their cheeks and adding a romantic atmosphere to the moment. However, their kiss was interrupted by Shitori, who bit the werewolf's leg with fury and jealousy, interrupting their magical moment. The three of them set off home, Ichiru tenderly holding the wolf cub's hand, and the dragon, with a majestic posture and proudly raised head, walked a little to the side, guarding his companions. The boy, still very young in a dirty cloak, desperately rushed through the dark forest. His voice, filled with fear and hope, screamed piercingly and begged for help, creating a feeling of hopelessness. Hundreds of arrows rushed towards him, wanting to harm the boy like a deadly swarm, eager to pierce the body and take life. Little Hisui suddenly stopped and turned around, his green eyes with vertical pupils wide open, reflecting fear and surprise. Using his powerful magic, the dragon crushed all his enemies. These events took place 20 years ago, long before the Alan Empire reached its greatness and became a great power. Only one little Hisui survived, the only one in his class who had magical scales on his body that protected him from many dangers. Barefoot, hiding his face, the werewolf rushed away, his manic strength out of control. In a mad run, he tore through the silence of the night, not realizing where he was going. When he was found, he was given into the care of a large sheep in the imperial palace, which was considered the most secure place in the entire country. There the little one could find refuge and safety. The last survivor of his clan now wore a collar. If he wanted, he could change his appearance to a personal one, but Hisui did not want to do so. The huge monster explained to him that the dragons had been attacked by the Yurlu clan and that he did not need to know any more details. Such knowledge would be too dangerous for a child. Having settled in the castle, Hisui went to the library, hoping to learn more there. Moreover, the baby could already calmly read letters, which gave him the opportunity to immerse himself in the amazing world of books. Sitting down on the floor and immersed in reading, the dragon learned from one of the ancient books about the religion of the rainbow serpent Yurlungara, and also discovered the rich mythology of the lands of Yurla. Long ago, magical creatures thirsting for power rebelled against the rainbow serpent. Upset and saddened by their betrayal, he shed tears that, falling to the ground, took the lives of animals and created a sand rain. The book fell to the floor with a dull thud as the boy finally learned the truth about the holy war and his clan, which stole the most power from the deity. The animal that looked after Hisui ran up to him, admonishing him that this was not the way to treat old books. The ancient texts contained important knowledge and needed to be treated with respect. But the boy had no time for this. Covering his eyes with his hands, he began to cry because of the bitter truth that fell upon him like heavy clouds hiding the sunlight. Cuddling up to a large plush sheep, the werewolf mourned his sad fate and thought about how he was left all alone in this huge and deserted world. The boy, leading a sheep behind him, walked through the royal courtyard surrounded by aristocrats, feeling their sidelong, contemptuous glances on him like blades cutting his soul. Hisui could clearly hear those around him whispering about his rage, assuring each other that in a fit of rage he could destroy several dozen adults. In the ceremonial hall, the young empress was already waiting for the dragon. Sitting majestically on the throne, she was the only one who was not afraid, and boldly looked him in the eyes. The woman confessed that a terrible war was coming. Followers of a terrible cult began hunting down citizens of the empire, and now the empress was no longer going to remain silent. Hisui had incredible strength and power that allowed him to fight any enemy. However, now, by the grace of the ruler, he received not only a new name, but also a unique opportunity to protect the country. That's when the boy's serious training began, learning to fight and masterfully wield a sword under the guidance of experienced mentors. He was soon joined by another young man of the same age, who was not just an ordinary guy, but a fire salamander capable of taking the form of a lizard. Patting the dragon on the shoulder, Zirko said with a smile that they were alike in many ways and offered to form a friendship so that they could learn to be true knights together. With a wide smile on his face, the red-haired boy, introducing himself by his full name, expressed joy and excitement about his new acquaintance. Together they grew up, and now, walking through the picturesque grounds of the palace, they discussed with excitement and hope the arrival of the Holy Virgin, who had the miraculous ability to heal any wounds and illnesses. A whole crowd of people had already gathered in the narrow passage, excitedly and impatiently getting to know the healer who had recently arrived in the city. The healer turned out to be a sweet girl with long blue hair that looked like fish ears. Her pale skin and blue dress created the image of a mysterious and enchanting being, as if she had emerged from the depths of the sea. Noticing her peers, Led and Hisui, among the crowd, she immediately headed towards them, illuminating the path with a joyful smile that pierced everything around like a ray of light. Jirko blushed in embarrassment, and gathering his courage with a gentle smile on his face, he put his hand to his heart. Then the guy, slightly bowing his head as a sign of respect, politely introduced himself to the young lady. There was a murmur of alarm among the crowd about Hisui, the dragon who, by daring to approach the holy maiden, represented the symbol of destruction and chaos. The healer named Malu paid no attention to the whispers of the crowd and their stupid prejudices. She herself was special, standing out from the crowd in her own way. Malu revealed that she was a mermaid who had come here to learn from the healers so that she could heal as many of the surrounding creatures as possible in the future. Deciding to act like a real boor, the dragon turned away from the holy maiden, thinking that her kindness was only due to the fact that the girl had not yet seen the horrors happening in this country. The lady only understandingly agreed that she would have to try and learn everything quickly, showing maximum attention and diligence. Hisui sincerely hoped that he would never meet this strange lady again. However, the mermaid, as if by fate, always found him and Zirko no matter where they went. Clutching her face in her hands, the healer shared her revelations with the werewolf in a panic, admitting that she could not sing at all and that tomorrow she had to perform a song at court. The man said that she should have refused, but sweet Malu was too modest. Wanting to know how bad it was, he asked her to sing. When the beautiful girl began to sing, the young man covered his mouth with his hand, trying his best to hold back his laughter at her unsuccessful attempts. After all, everyone believed that the sirens sang like angels. The embarrassed Holy Virgin sat down nearby and began to complain about the mockery of the large reptile, which did not give her peace and made her suffer. As he passed by, Jirko stopped under the shade of a spreading tree to see how his friends were progressing in their exciting endeavor. Sitting alone and staring at his body, the dragon realized something interesting. He could hide the signs of sand that hardened on the monster's skin. In the books Hisui read, the power of dragons was described as something extraordinary, since the evil reptiles stole it from the deity, which gave them incredible abilities. With a fury that burned in his soul like a wildfire, the man clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white, gradually entering a state of frantic rage. Sitting next to his best friend, Lead admitted that he noticed how Malu looked at the dragon lovingly, and how he was always afraid that they would leave him alone. Bowing his head, the werewolf protested. His handsome friend was very much mistaken, and he, on the contrary, should take a closer look at himself. Lead did not understand his colleague's words about the power of revenge, who claimed that it gives sharpness and determination, while love only dulls the sword and makes it weaker. That was the way the world was, and there was no use denying the obvious facts. The dragon could not forget his painful past and the tears he had shed in despair. It was therefore not surprising that a conflict soon arose between Liad and Hisui in the middle of a mission at night. Zirko defended his position, believing that there was no point in unnecessary violence and bloodshed. But the werewolf had a different opinion. In his opinion, their task was the total destruction of the enemy, and only in this way could they bring the end of the war closer. Roughly but confidently, the loyal friend declared that he was the captain, and that was why all decisions were made exclusively by him. At that moment, Hisui allowed his anger to consume him completely. He was tormented by constant anxiety, and no one gave him a moment of peace, not the slightest chance to breathe calmly. The dragon paid dearly for his overconfidence. The man was quickly captured and taken prisoner as the last survivor of his clan. These villains turned out to be fanatical followers of an ancient cult who sought to offer a special offering to their deity. They believed that only through this sacrifice could they win his favor. The guy's hands were shackled with special magical handcuffs that prevented him from moving and took away all his strength, as if invisible chains were devastating the creature down to its very soul. The dragon's captors discussed among themselves that, despite his young age, he behaved too courageously and calmly. Unable to contain his rage any longer, Hisui shattered the magical collar that restricted the abilities of magical creatures with a loud bang and released all of his power. The army of knights that found the sectarians was ready to immediately attack them in order to justify the Empress's expectations placed on them and protect the city from the impending threat. There was a loud explosion of magic, accompanied by a blinding green light that illuminated everything around and deafened those present. The evil dragon destroyed his enemies indiscriminately with uncontrollable fury, completely devoting himself to revenge. He did not spare anyone in his path, turning everything into ashes and ruins. Hisui was breathing heavily and kneeling down, trying to catch his breath. The boy felt a deep satisfaction from the revenge that had finally brought the long-awaited relief. However, his joy quickly evaporated as he realized the full extent of what he had done. A cold fear ran down his spine, and the world seemed to go dark. The hospital employee expressed her deep gratitude to Malu for her invaluable contribution, emphasizing her incredible dedication and caring attitude towards patients. Exhausted and barely able to stand on her feet, the healer felt how her body desperately needed long-awaited rest and peaceful sleep. But she was unable to rest for even a few hours, because a young man appeared who brought with him disturbing news that destroyed all hopes for a respite. The beautiful healer immediately rushed to help the place where the wounded captain lay after a difficult and complex battle with the occultists. There, inside the tent, Hisui was already sitting, his head hanging low, as if he had done something wrong. His posture and gaze, full of sadness and remorse, reflected the full depth of his inner struggle and regret. Turning at his friend's call, the man frightened the lady with his empty, lifeless eyes, devoid of any sparkle. Jerko lay nearby, transformed into a horrible monster. He was barely breathing and unconscious, like a lifeless doll thrown to the ground. Hisui, full of despair and anxiety, turned to Malu for help. The dragon begged her that if the maiden could somehow help their friend, that she do so immediately and save Lead from certain death. Despite her fatigue, the mermaid could not refuse the dragon and agreed to try to help. The heart of the kind woman was filled with compassion for others. The others sat outside the tent in tense anticipation, exchanging anxious glances filled with anxiety and impatience. Any moment could change the outcome of the situation. The werewolf was among them when he heard that the saint had suddenly become ill. The man immediately hurried to pull back the tent fabric to see for himself. And indeed, the siren turned completely black from tail to crown, covered in dark sand that sucked the life out of magical creatures. Paying no attention to anyone, the girl continued her treatment, ready to give everything just to save the fire salamander, even if the price was the death of the healer herself. Hisui could only watch in horror and helplessness as he lost his best friend for the second time due to his own fault, since it was he who brought her here. Eventually, Jirko recovered and his hands were completely regenerated, but the guilt of his past mistakes and the death of his beloved weighed on his soul, causing him to slowly go mad. The sick boy screamed, angry at his friend and the world in general. Malu deserved a long and happy life, and this injustice tore his heart apart. The dragon could only listen to the accusations against him, without having the right to object, and being forced to bear this burden until the end of his days. Covering her face with her hands, the salamander thought sadly that it would have been better if the mermaid had never tried to save him, expressing all her pain and despair in this moment. Getting close to the reptile turned out to be a fatal mistake for Zirko, and the lizard realized this only when all paths to correction were already closed, leaving him with a bitter sense of loss and regret. Having decided to hide from everyone, the dragon, covered in sand, was quietly living out his last days when suddenly something fell on him from above, disturbing the peace and quiet. That someone turned out to be an unusually beautiful girl with thick brown hair and mesmerizing violet eyes. A little later, she introduced herself as Ichiru. While at home, Lady Ain loudly announced that she was going to the Empress's palace. The Empress expressed a desire to know all the details of the mysterious rain absorption. Ichiru was deeply shocked when she learned that the imperial order to conduct an assessment of her magical abilities had finally been given, something the orphan had persistently sought for a long time. A few days after the spider was summoned to the luxurious throne room, Futaba was also invited inside along with Shitori. Before letting her guests go, the Marquise emphasized that they should return to her in a couple of days, and then they could go to the capital together. The White Lady was at peace for the Holy Maiden, knowing that she would be treated with favor in the palace, appreciating her healing magic and outstanding abilities. Ichiru knew that before, Hisui had been monitoring the moments when she should stop using magic. Now, she had to learn to do it on her own. The orphan wanted to practice using and controlling magic before leaving, so that she would be confident in her abilities and prepared for the upcoming trials. While the girl was thinking about where to find Fuku for training and how to best prepare for the upcoming tests, her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the sound of an approaching man's footsteps. It was a dragon that spread its huge wings and invited Ichiru into its arms, offering protection and comfort in this difficult moment. The girl stared at the guy in surprise and confusion, trying to comprehend what was happening and understand what he wanted from her. Her thoughts were full of questions and doubts. Realizing that the embrace was a means of casting a shield, Futaba threw herself into Hisui's arms. The maiden was worried that the dragon's spell would interfere with the assessment of her abilities. The werewolf explained in detail that once the trap reached the capital, all the spells cast would instantly dissipate, and nothing would be able to prevent a thorough inspection. The men's arms hugged Ichiru tightly, trying to convey their strength and confidence. The dragon added that she had a long way to go, on which protection would definitely not hurt. Shitori shyly refused the big reptile's embrace, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected display of care. Before leaving the estate, Futaba kindly asked the owner about his health and asked if he had any symptoms similar to those of sand. The owner of the house merely waved it off with a smile, assuring the Holy Virgin that he felt fine, and there was no reason to worry. Lying in bed with the wolf cub, Ichiru couldn't sleep. The rains had decreased a little, but they still continued to fall, taking lives. Suddenly, Fuku, a little hare, came into the girl's bed with the wolf cub, and his appearance frightened the Holy Maiden. Winking at the girl, who was scared to death by his sudden appearance, the rabbit called her an early bird with a playful smile. His fur had a grayish tint. Outraged, Ichiru froze in surprise when Fuku told her that the sand was actually slowly but inexorably consuming Hisui. The dragon simply didn't want the healer to worry about him. At first, the orphan thought it was just an inappropriate joke, but then, overcome with alarm, she asked with obvious concern in her voice how much the dragon was covered in sand. In her past life, she also showed concern for her pet Mahu, carefully asking about his health and condition before leaving him alone to die. The next day, the owner of the caged dog finally decided to take him to the vet, but unfortunately, it turned out that it was too late. Ichiru jumped out of bed, intending to check on Hisui. The woman's heart was beating with fear and horror. An anxious premonition was spreading in her chest. The saint quickly ran to the door behind which the dragon's room was located and began to knock loudly, desperately calling her friend by name, hoping that the guy would hear her. Ichiru, feeling a little nervous, carefully turned the door handle and, gathering her courage, quietly asked if she could come in. However, only silence came in response. The previous owner's room was empty. There was little furniture there, but the large windows allowed light to flow freely inside, filling the space with a soft glow. Confused, Ichiru and Fuku looked around, but there really wasn't a soul inside, and not a single trace indicating where the owner might have gone. The lady was overcome with trembling from fear and excitement, and she began to shake as she could not get rid of anxious thoughts, worrying about Hisui's health. The rabbit, noticing Ichiru's anxiety, began to worry himself, realizing that he had unwittingly caused what had happened, and decided to tell the whole truth. Therefore, the bunny assumed that Hisui used Rosalette's potion to change his appearance. If Futaba asked him about it directly, the dragon himself would tell the whole truth. Running out into the street, the girl rushed to look for her friend, lamenting how naive she had been before, and realizing that she should have been more attentive. Futaba ran with such frantic speed and determination that she completely failed to notice the obstacle in her path. Losing her balance, the orphan began to fall. Trying unsuccessfully to hold on to the grass, the lady clung with all her might to every stalk, hoping that this would help her not to fall off the cliff, but her strength was quickly fading. Reaching out her hand and desperately calling for help, Ichiru prepared herself for the worst, realizing that at this critical moment, fate could be cruel. And then suddenly a mysterious silhouette appeared. A familiar cloak fluttered majestically in the wind, filling the atmosphere with mystery. It was a dragon who, at the most necessary moment, caught the girl, saving her from an inevitable and painful collision with the ground. Futaba screamed joyfully, unable to contain her delight and relief that the man was alive and well. The saint burst into tears, saying that it might be too late to heal the dragon and that it might die before Ichiru could save it. Futaba froze in place as the man asked if this was the reason for her long and arduous search, hoping to hear the truth from her lips. Green symbols began to appear one after another, forming a single word, and crystal magic fragments sparkled around them, creating a magical atmosphere. Standing in front of the guy, the girl tried to understand if it was the Hisui barrier, which, according to rumors, was so powerful that it could reflect any attacks and protect against the most dangerous magic. Instead of the guy, a boy appeared, a young version of the werewolf. He apologized to the girl with regret in his voice for not finding the courage to tell her the whole truth earlier, knowing that it could change their destinies. The adult Hisui explained that ignorance breeds fearlessness, and that was why the saint could remain by his side, unaware of the hidden dangers and sinister secrets that surrounded them. After this, the former knight of the empire fell silent. Something prevented him from continuing the story, as if an invisible force was fettering his words and depriving him of the ability to speak. Ichiru asked not to force the magical beast to tell if it did not want to, and also to return to its true form to stop the deception and allow the truth to come out. It wasn't worth using wind magic for such a trivial matter. Futaba felt uneasy about the consequences that could follow from such a rash decision. The dragon looked sadly at his sweet companion, and then said that he was not ready to completely say goodbye to his life. The thing was, Hisui had a hard time accepting Ichiru's magic. Moreover, he told the whole story about his old healer friend and Zurko, revealing details of their long and complicated relationship. The girl did not understand why he was telling her about his sad and difficult fate, immersing the saint in events of the past that seemed distant and unfamiliar. Malu was supposed to leave a deep imprint on Hisui's soul after her tragic death right before his eyes, forever changing his inner world and outlook on life. Ichiru always felt that the dragon cared too much about her, but she never imagined that Hisui carried such a heavy burden with him, hiding his fears and pain deep inside. The werewolf, bored with the prolonged silence, drew attention to himself by breaking the silence and asked Futaba if she was now afraid of knowing the whole truth about him. If the healer had known about the true state of affairs of the reptile at her first meeting, she would most likely have been frightened and, overcome with fear, would have avoided further meetings in every possible way. The sad lady asked if there was any way to stop the attacks of pain, hoping to hear consent and find a way to relieve her friend from excruciating suffering. The man answered negatively, explaining that the pain attacks were the last defense to save Hisui's life, and that eliminating them could lead to unpredictable consequences. The healer walked quickly towards the boy, reminding him that he had previously said that the incident in the past was the last one, and that nothing like that would happen again. Coming closer, Ichiru suggested that if she stayed close, nothing bad would happen. Perhaps even if she gradually healed him, she could completely cure him. But a sudden gesture stopped her, not allowing her to move forward and approach the man as the maiden had hoped. Hisui, looking her straight in the eye, warned that no one knew what could happen next. It could be dangerous. Inside, the dragon did not understand how anyone could be happy with him. From now on, the road to the palace was open for Futaba, and the saint did not need to specially step onto this thorny path. Admitting to himself and the girl, Hisui said that she would be much better off elsewhere than with him, and that her future would be much brighter away from the difficulties he brought. The cruel words brought only pain to the orphan, who, despite understanding the futility of her attempts, could not help her friend. Slowly, the man began to loosen his grip on the girl's hand, trying not to cause her discomfort or suffering. Not wanting to give up so easily, Ichiru wanted to confess her feelings to the dragon, but the lady was suddenly interrupted, depriving her of the opportunity to express everything that had accumulated in her heart. The magical barrier began to crumble under the onslaught of fiery explosions that blinded with bright flashes and threatened to destroy everything around. It turned out that the source of the explosions was Zirko, who had long been targeting the dragon. However, what exactly he wanted from the reptile remained unknown. Ichiru's mouth dropped open in shock that the intruder was led. She couldn't believe that an imperial diplomat was the villain. Leaning closer, Hisui soothingly reminded that the Holy Maiden and the wolf cub had powerful protective magic cast on them. This magic was capable of protecting them from any threat. A human figure suddenly appeared in front of the couple, rudely violating their personal space and forcing them to retreat. This unexpected action brought tension into their interaction. Jerko, dressed in a classic suit and his skin covered in black sand, stood before them. The Lord was surprised to see that a healer was also with the dragon. Unfortunately, Lead's petrification only continued to worsen, his skin becoming increasingly covered in black sand. Turning to the miss, the gentleman warned her that it was dangerous to be so close to the dragon. Moreover, he advised not to succumb to the charm of the magical creature, because no matter how cute it may seem, there was still a monstrous beginning in its essence. Hisui was a mysterious and sinister reptile, capable of easily turning a human into a sacrifice to his insatiable pride, leaving behind a trail of horror and reverence. Standing in the forest and looking at the former knight's back, Futaba couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. Despite his gloomy appearance, the man didn't wish her any harm. Hisui glanced over his shoulder at Ichiru, as if checking to see if she was okay, and his eyes showed more concern than she would have expected from such a grim creature. And when a man tenderly embraced a girl, giving her peace and comfort, he allowed her to live in his house and forgave her pranks with magic, surrounding her with care and understanding. True, with such a penetrating and kind look in green eyes, it would be impossible to treat someone as a victim. And even more so, they could not radiate such a sincere smile. Ichiru stepped forward, meeting Zirko's gaze with determination. Without a trace of fear, she began to confront him, firmly stating that everything was not as he claimed. Instead, she called Hisui a very sympathetic dragon, not at all as scary and bad as they tried to make him out to be, emphasizing his kindness and nobility. Frowning and placing her hand on her chest, the saint exclaimed that Lead was wrong and deeply mistaken, her voice filled with confidence and righteous anger. Suddenly, Ichiru felt herself begin to rise from her spot into the air, as if an invisible force was making her float, giving her a feeling of flight and freedom. This was the power of the dragon. The girl began to rise higher and higher, moving away from the place where today's conversation between old friends was supposed to take place, leaving their argument far below. After which, a high wall appeared in front of the lady, consisting of crystals shimmering green, like a magical barrier protecting her from the entire outside world. Left alone with Hisui, Zirko noticed that his former friend's face had changed after his companion's departure, acquiring a more gloomy and stern expression. To this, the dragon stated that the former knight himself had cunningly taken advantage of the saint's trust in order to get closer to his old comrade, manipulating her kindness and faith in him for his own selfish purposes. Surrounded by crystals, Lead resigned himself to the fact that he was slowly dying. He staggered from side to side from fatigue and weakness, losing the last of his strength. Hisui did not lose hope of conveying to Zirko that he had never put his life and his pride, including the life of the mermaid he knew, on the scales. What had happened was just an accident. Immediately, at the mention of Malu, a fiery explosion with a deafening roar hit the dragon's shield, flashing blindingly and scattering around in dazzling sparks, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. Lead was enraged at the mention of his dead lover's name, and overcome with rage, he struck mercilessly. His gray eyes, full of pain, did not leave his enemy. There was a loud collision of fire and fragments of green wind, two elements merging into a furious whirlwind, tearing apart the space around. The image of Malu, whom he had failed to protect and save from adversity, arose in the salamander's mind. Instead, he had been useless, and this memory burned into his soul. Lying on a soft pillow, the boy could not hold back the tears that flowed from his eyes. The captain was miraculously saved and taken to the hospital. His friend stood next to him and also wiped his eyes with his hand, trying to hide his sadness and melancholy. The dragon tried his best to be strong in order to support his comrade in this difficult moment. From time to time, Hisui changed wet towels, monitoring Jirko's condition, helped change clothes when he was sweating, and brought water, trying to ease his friend's suffering. In response, the guy heard only rude words with requests to stop visiting the sick man and refusals to accept help. Lead still remembered eavesdropping on his friend's conversations, observing how important revenge was to the dragon. However, despite his thirst for revenge, the dragon did not lose his charm, managing to remain attractive. Jirko himself hated competition, but the reptile clearly enjoyed the rivalry, so the man had no choice but to accept the challenge and join the game. Hisui tried to reach the salamander, shouting his name while simultaneously not forgetting to fight off the fire and flames that threatened them both, his movements precise and polished. With a quick movement, the dragon dodged the new attack, its flexible body deftly twisting, avoiding the flash of fire that flashed past. Lead also deftly dodged the green spells that were trying to grab the captain. With a cracking sound, the blows still managed to penetrate the werewolf's magical shield, and seeing this, he frowned. The magical protection he relied on began to crumble under the force of the attacks. Suddenly, two large sparrows of cold descended upon Hisui, chirping happily and wanting to play with him. Their icy wings shimmered in the light as they circled around him, creating eddies of frosty air. The dragon was surprised to realize that they were not ice birds, but water birds when he got a closer look at them. The drops of water dripping from their plumage created a sparkling aura around them. Suddenly, from the body of the sparrow's soft fur, the face of Ichiru, who had been hiding there all this time, skillfully concealing her presence, appeared. Standing in front of the man who had allowed her to live in his home, the girl screamed, demanding that they stop immediately, her voice desperate and heartfelt, reflecting all the pain and anxiety. Then suddenly the saint realized that the attacks had stopped and everything around had become calm. Silence enveloped them, and a feeling of peace filled the space. There, in the distance, the green magic of the dragon held a small black creature, which, upon closer inspection, turned out to be the same imperial diplomat and old acquaintance of Hisui. Covered in black sand, the salamander was coughing fitfully, clearly in pain. His breathing was ragged and every movement was difficult, demonstrating the depth of his torment and despair. The girl was surprised to realize that Lead's true form was before her. His black sand-covered salamander revealed the truth about his true form. Trying to get out, the black monster moved in different directions as if in agony, trying to escape, although it was he who first started hunting the dragon. Ichiru watched in horror as the monster began to disappear, turning into sand, slowly crumbling away and leaving behind only emptiness. Also noticing this, Hisui waved his hand, from which sparks of green magic flew, illuminating the space around and stopping the process of the monster's disappearance. Immediately, Jirko rose into the air and began to move smoothly towards the people, as if hovering above the ground, leaving behind a barely noticeable trace of magical aura. Picking up the writhing and struggling Lid, Hisui gently but firmly asked him to calm down, warning that otherwise he could die from exhaustion. The birds, after a long discussion among themselves, made a final decision to leave this place. Having fulfilled their important mission, they went home. The dragon clearly had no intention of harming Zirko, holding him carefully in his powerful paws. He was trying to reach out to his old friend, radiating warmth and kindness. To get the salamander's attention, the dragon said that Malu had looked at Zirko until her last breath. His voice trembled with memories, trying to convey the depth of sadness and significance of these words. Waking up, the black beast opened his eyes at the mention of his old lover. His gaze reflected the pain of memories and longing for lost times. Approaching the two young men, the healer, radiating confidence and compassion, offered her help in healing lead. Wanting to help the monster, she handed over a blue gemstone, a fragile which could be carried around and had the ability to cure the poisonous sand. After this, the Holy Virgin, with a gentle smile on her lips, declared that she intended to give Lead this precious stone at their next meeting. The words were imbued with sincerity. Afterwards, Ichiru added that Malu most likely wanted to save Zirko by using her last magic on him so that he would live, which meant that the salamander should have valued her gift as a symbol of deep love. In the past, looking at the mermaid whose skin was blackened by the poisonous sand, Zirko begged her to stop. The girl was beautiful, with a determined look in her golden eyes and a true heart. Waking up in the hospital, Lead cried, unable to accept the reality without his beloved. Even though the healer had saved him by her own will, the loss was too great for his heart. The man continued to blame his friend, although in reality he simply could not forgive himself for his helplessness. He should have accepted the truth from the very beginning. Firmly and with determination in her voice, Ichiru stated that her sincere and unwavering desire was to preserve Lead's life. The Holy Maiden was prepared to fight to the last to ensure that this goal was achieved. Beloved Lead, the healer, would probably say that if she were here at this moment, her age, as well as her thoughts and feelings, would remain exactly the same. The salamander stopped resisting and extinguished its flame. The man's eyes softened, and he made a wise decision to accept the offer of his longtime friend and his charming companion. Ichiru smiled widely, her eyes shining with happiness and excitement, as she was given the opportunity to save a new magical creature that glowed with a mysterious aura. Tears poured from the monster's eyes, and despite all his incredible strength, the guy sincerely wished that it was not he who survived, but Malu. But now he was powerless to change anything. Sitting on the dragon's powerful paws, Lead sobbed, drowning in bitter tears, while his two friends tried to console him. He still deeply loved the beautiful mermaid and knew that his love for her would be eternal. The wolf cub woke up from his sleep. His big eyes slowly opened and he blinked sleepily, as if trying to bring himself back to reality after sweet and enchanting dreams, where the world was soft and cozy. Looking at the spot next to him, the werewolf realized with alarm that it was empty and Ichiru was nowhere to be seen. His heart began to beat faster as he realized that she might have left, leaving him alone. At this time, the girl carefully examined Hisui's friend, on whose fur there was not a single clean spot. There was black sand everywhere. With the help of the magic stone, slowly but gradually, Zirko began to heal and brighten. The magical power gradually drove out the darkness and restored his original essence. And then Hisui learned the truth from the salamander, who, with bitterness in her voice, said that the war was not yet over. The salamander herself had personally participated in long and tense negotiations with the hostile country. The war had left the country significantly weakened, leaving it defenseless against its enemies, and the empire told the purple butterflies that it was willing to return their territories if they agreed to sign a peace treaty. To this proposal, the cloaked men replied that they could never forgive the dragon, who had sinisterly committed so many misfortunes and destroyed countless numbers of their fellow citizens. Indeed, before the appearance of Ichiru, the lifespan of Hisui was roughly calculated on paper as the inevitable outcome of his existence, noted in the pages of ancient prophecies. The angry butterflies flying around in the cage asked why the dragon was still alive and why they were still being deceived. If the promise was broken, they were going to act immediately. The tired Zirko was almost asleep. Hisui, noticing this, hastened to assure him that he could rest and that they would discuss all the important issues later. Without thinking twice, the dragon handed over his friend to Ichiru, completely trusting her, since he needed to step away. He himself was confident that the girl would cope with the task. The saint, tenderly taking Lead into her arms, asked with deep emotion and anxiety where the dragon was going to go, leaving her in a state of complete bewilderment and anxiety. She tried to stop the young man, trying to guide him on the path of truth, and above all to help him get rid of the sand that covered his body. Desperately, Futaba agreed to take on all his attacks, and despite the thorny path and difficult relationships, she was ready to stay by his side. The maiden, in utter despair, cried out that Hisui was not at fault and that he, like all other magical creatures, had an unconditional right to be healed no matter what the circumstances. This made a deep impression on the dragon, who, as if enchanted, stopped and with invisible wariness directed his piercing gaze at the healer. Ichiru tried to confess her feelings again, but, feeling a painful tickle in her throat as if someone was preventing her from speaking, she froze, unable to utter a word. Leaning towards the holy maiden with deep respect, the former knight, embracing her face with gentle hands, looked down at her with trembling affection, as if he wanted to preserve this moment forever. The dear lady tried to utter at least one word, but despite all her efforts, her voice remained quiet and invisible, as if a deaf silence had swallowed up all her attempts to express her thoughts. After kissing the girl, the man said with sincere feeling that he loved her and wanted to protect her more than anything in the world, which greatly embarrassed Futaba, leaving her in confusion. After the guy left, the girl was left alone, and tears continued to flow from her eyes without stopping, leaving wet marks on her face. Soon Shitori appeared in the forest, overcoming obstacles and stumbling over tree roots, rushing towards his mistress, screaming without ceasing from the excitement and anxiety that filled his soul. The boy, with a look of surprise on his face, asked why Led looked like he was enveloped in a shadow of coal ash, and why the girl was crying bitterly as if her heart was torn apart. The healer brushed off the boy's persistent questions, explaining that her priority now was to heal Zurko as quickly as possible, while Hisui went about his business. Since being near the dragon was extremely dangerous, he did not allow anyone to come close to him, and always remained alone, immersed in darkness and surrounded by fragments of his magic. The wolf cub stared at the reptile, looking at it carefully and noticing with surprise that Hisui did not emit any unpleasant or dangerous smells. Quietly and thoughtfully, Ichiru agreed with the boy, emphasizing that his words were not only true and fair, but also reflected a deep understanding of the situation. The dragon, possessing incomparable strength and power, experienced an inner fear of himself, fearing his own power and unpredictability, which could lead to irreparable consequences. The boy, thinking deeply about the situation, came to the conclusion that they should take responsibility for their friend, look after him, and provide the necessary assistance. Shitori gently placed his paw on Ichiru's face, and with a warm smile offered to go together in search of the dragon, assuring that under his protection they would be completely safe and in no danger. While the maiden continued to cry bitterly, the wolf cub, trying to console her, gently wiping away her tears, with warm care assured her that everything would definitely work out and they would be able to overcome all difficulties together. Smiling, Shitori was glad that in this life he had the opportunity to support his mistress with both words and actions. He extended his hand and patiently waited for her response. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, Fuku appeared on the boy's head, and he was pleasantly surprised to see Mr. Lizard. The werewolf raised his gaze to the rabbit. Leading his mistress by the arm through the dense forest, the boy carefully showed the way, following his intuition and keen senses, because he could catch the subtle scent of a dragon lurking somewhere ahead. The saint stood in awe when she learned that it was also possible to spy on men using magic. She herself could do it. It turned out that Shitori had mastered the art of magic, and his mastery in this field became clear and obvious, which he confirmed with pride and confidence. Futaba watched with slight embarrassment and genuine interest as her little friend, full of enthusiasm, tried to create his own magic and demonstrate his achievements. In a dark hall, shrouded in thick darkness and hidden under long cloaks, a mysterious society, whispering insinuatingly, discussed the mysterious disappearance of Zurko and the fate of the hated dragon. The human figure with blonde hair and a robe viciously called the magical creature a vile scum that should not be trusted. As the occultists were about to decisively fight the giant reptile, suddenly a deafening roar was heard that shook everything around and caused a wave of anxiety and fear. In the dark shelter filled with an ominous atmosphere, Hisui suddenly appeared, his impressive size far exceeding the size of everyone present combined. With sarcasm in his voice, he said that he had decided to visit them personally before they could cause any trouble in the empire, as if foreshadowing the inevitable consequences of their actions. The purple butterflies, glittering with shades of amethyst, began to flutter nervously in the cage, overcome with panic and terror, their instinct to desperately flee from the impending threat awakening. One of the people mockingly spoke about the impudent man, calling him a fool, and contemptuously added that they had a whole arsenal of tools to deal with the evil werewolf. Easily startled and surprised, Hisui recoiled in utter confusion and bewilderment as a barrage of stabs rained down on him, causing him to feel a deep sense of unease and worry. The clawed paw, its sharp claws flashing, slowly reached out to the man with long hair, as if it wanted to cause him terrible harm. However, contrary to expectations, the man only devoured the other man's memories. Standing in front of the magic spell, the dragon confirmed that if the memory disappeared, then the contract would also disappear. For a while, the occultists had to remain silent. A bright green glow suddenly burst out of the hand, like a magical spell, enveloping everything around with a mystical light and turning the space into a mesmerizing world of mysterious lights. The tired Hisui, having exhausted all his strength and feeling incredibly tired, could barely stand on his feet, slowly and with difficulty moving through the endlessly blooming field. Ichiro continued to seem like a carefree and naive girl to the man, and he could not forget her words and awkward attempts to confess her feelings. Remembering their first meeting, the werewolf cursed angrily, believing that the normal reaction to his threat would be fear and an attempt to run away from the huge monster, but the holy maiden turned out to be an exception to this rule. The girl easily stirred the dragon's soul with her smile and kindness. The longer she remained in his presence, the more the guy began to fear that he would lose control of himself. Images of old friends and loved ones arose in my head, whose fate was a test of fate, death, and misfortune, leaving a deep mark on the soul. Turning around, Hisui quickly moved away from the place, deciding that something like this should not happen again to Ichiru, to avoid repeating the same tragic mistake. The sweet girl, with a sincere smile on her face and genuine joy in her eyes, hugged the magical creature, not paying attention to its potential danger, which could easily harm her. Putting his hand to his forehead, Hisui painfully struggled with the inner conflict and the strong desire to be near the holy maiden, trying to cope with the contradictions in his heart. A solitary tree stood majestically in the center of a wide field, where under the clear blue sky its branches seemed to seek peace. In the thick grass, like jewels, snow-white flowers were hidden. Peacefully clothed in clouds, the dragon, leaning against an ancient tree, sat with his eyes closed, immersed either in sleep or in deep thought. Suddenly, the man's train of thought was interrupted when Shitori and Ichiru, using his name and following the subtle scent of his presence, discovered his location. Still silent, the werewolf listened as his friends rejoiced that the place where the former knight had been sitting was nearby, and they were able to find him without much difficulty. Finally, the boy spoke up and asked if the girl had intended to find out where he had been all this time, to which the saint replied that she trusted him and that everything Hisui had done was for their protection. The wolf cub declared that the dragon should not hide from them or tease them anymore, otherwise he would use his heightened sense of smell to find him again and detain him again. After this, the boy added that he and his mistress were very worried about him. After that, the werewolf just looked away and went to rest, leaving their conversation. Futaba deeply realized that for her, her friend occupied a special, important place in her life, and his significance to her was simply inestimable, like a treasure that could not be overestimated. And so her heart felt no joy when he, despite all the dangers and risks to his own life, desperately tried to protect them, because instead of delight, it was filled with anxiety and fear for his safety. Before the girl could try to express her feelings and confess her love again, Hisui abruptly interrupted her, blocking her voice and not allowing her to utter a single word. But the Holy Virgin did not lose her composure and kissed the man, filling the moment with warmth and sincerity that only the two of them understood. Red with shame and emotion, Ichiru moved away from the guy and exclaimed indignantly, demanding to know why he didn't want to listen to her, and took away her voice. The werewolf was confused by the saint's persistence, which was completely unusual for him, since he had never encountered such an expression of affection and love for himself from another person before. The ancient dragon, with a majestic smile on his lips, watched as the maiden fell silent, and gracefully said that she was now silent of her own free will. Finally, having made a firm decision, the girl, with an expression of determination on her face, declared that she had fallen in love with Hisui, and this feeling had become so obvious and unchangeable to her that she had no choice but to openly admit it. Sitting next to the man under an ancient tree, the saint tenderly asked him to show her the sand that had harmed him. The maiden promised to stay with him wherever he went. Long ago, when he was still a knight, the dragon convinced himself that a family was a luxury he could not afford. No one dared to pursue the monster. Covered in sand and exhausted from constant losses, Hisui was tired of the pain and chose not to get close to anyone anymore to avoid further suffering and disappointment. And then, on the horizon, appeared the lovely Ichiru, whom the dragon did not want to disappoint anymore. She became his love, a source of hope and a light in a dark life. In his true form, almost the entire body of the werewolf was covered in black sand, which penetrated under the skin, causing unbearable pain and leaving traces of its dark shadows on his being. Sparks of magic appeared in the girl's hands, which she directed to heal her lover. Now, thanks to her magic, everything should be fine. Accepting the healer's help, the guy sincerely apologized to her for having hidden the truth about his experiences for so long. Closing his eyes, Hisui admitted with a deep sigh that Ichiru was so important to him that he could not imagine how he would cope with her loss. The fear of losing her squeezed his heart. Tears of joy flowed down the girl's cheeks, because now there were no more misunderstandings between them. Her soul was filled with warmth and relief, knowing that all the obstacles and omissions were left behind. The couple in love were sitting under a tree when the Holy Virgin, with genuine interest, asked the man if he felt tired after the healing session, showing concern and attention to his condition. At this, the young man brought his face closer to the girl and in a soft but insistent tone ordered Ichiru not to overexert herself and not to use her powers too often, warning against excessive tension. Their faces were so close that one could feel the intimacy of the moment and feel each other's breath, filling the space between them with a special warmth and understanding. But at that moment their kiss was interrupted by Shitori, jealously pulling the fabric of the dragon's shirt away from his sweet mistress, as if trying to keep her closeness only for himself. Hisui responded by simply patting the boy on the head, praising the boy for his good work and keen sense of smell, while showing kind approval and respect. Turning back to the lady, the dragon explained that the Empress would certainly appreciate Ichiru's strength, and if so, then he was also willing to return to the palace and regain his position as a knight. Futaba was over the moon to be able to meet her lover often after moving into the castle. The girl's joy was immeasurable from the fact that they were able to spend time together. Seeing such a funny and cute reaction, Hisui couldn't help but let the smile that blossomed on his face. His eyes sparkled with genuine pleasure, and the corners of his lips trembled with joy. At home, the couple was already met by the fire salamander and Fuku, who politely welcomed them back, showing warm hospitality and cordiality. Noticing how tired the wolf cub was, Ichiru said that she would return, but before that she wanted to put the boy to bed, showing care and attention to the needs of the beast. Left alone, Hisui called Zirko to a serious conversation. For a while there was silence between them, filled with tension and anticipation of what was to be discussed. The man told his friend that the memories of the top brass that Led worked with had disappeared and that they were no longer a threat at the moment. Deeply moved, the salamander sincerely confessed to her friend that she was very sorry for how long and unfairly she blamed him for what had happened. Her words were full of sincere remorse. When his friend said that he should be punished, Hisui asked with surprise and bewilderment who was going to judge him. Seeing the questioning look, the werewolf explained that he had no intention of commenting on the incident or suing his former colleague. Moreover, Zirko could not write a report either. If the salamander really wanted punishment that badly, Hisui was willing to choose it for the monster himself and carry it out, showing his willingness to take responsibility for the decision. Frightened, but trying hard to maintain an outward calm, the creature closed its eyes, trying not to show its fear, and decided to accept whatever the dragon came up with. However, instead of pain and suffering, Zirko received only an unpleasant slap on the forehead, which, although unexpected, was not nearly as severe as he expected. Standing before Led, the werewolf stated with determination that this punishment was what he deserved, with full recognition of his guilt and humility. Ichiru's room was lit with a pleasant warm light coming through the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere that brought peace and a feeling of homeliness. The Holy Maiden herself sat on the bed next to the boy, watching his tired state after using magical powers with a compassionate gaze. Smiling, Futaba gently asked the beast to take a comfortable position so that he could rest peacefully and recuperate, regaining his former vigor and energy. The werewolf, unable to calm down after what he saw, burned with jealousy, watching how his mistress was surrounded by the attention and affection of the dragon, which caused in him deep envy and longing for the tenderness that seemed so inaccessible to him. Sitting down on the bed next to Shitori, Fuku asked him with a worried look about his well-being, noticing the boy's strange posture and the expression on his face, full of discomfort. Burying his face in the pillow and trying to avoid the rabbit's gaze, the wolf cub muttered, not very confidently and not entirely convincingly, that everything was perfectly fine. However, when the boy raised his head, tears began to flow from his eyes. He loved his mistress so much, while she, on the contrary, was attached to the vile Hisui instead of Shitori. Although Ichiru was very reluctant to let the dragon die, her little friend could not bear the thought of the Holy Maiden crying, which made his anxiety and sadness worse. The boy, shocked and depressed, continued to sob, his ears down, unable to cope with the painful thought that Futaba would still leave him all alone. Trying to cheer up the werewolf, Fuku reminded him with a smile about how he, with great courage and gratitude, managed to make Ichiru happy and lift her spirits, giving her joy and light in a difficult moment. Diving under the blanket, the boy agreed with the bunny, after which his good friend confirmed the fact that Ichiru loved him as much as Hisui did. Moreover, Fuku winked slyly and remarked that many things could change, because when Shitori grows up, she will also be able to compete for the heart of the sweet Holy Maiden, as their destinies may intertwine again in the future. These words inspired the little werewolf, and he nodded to himself and resolutely promised that he would do everything possible to change his fate. As long as the girl was not married, he still had a chance for happiness. At this time, Zirko apologized to the owners of the estate with deep sincerity and respect for all the inconvenience caused, acknowledging that his actions could have caused concern and discomfort. Before leaving the room, the man held out the gem in his hand with obvious respect and attention, seeking to return it to clear up the misunderstanding. However, the Holy Virgin refused to take back the magic stone, suggesting that the sage keep it for himself. During this time, Ichiru, as before, was busy creating a new magic amulet. The sincerely grateful imperial diplomat expressed his gratitude for saving him and for forgiving Led, noting how important their generosity and magnanimity was to him. Bowing before the healer, he expressed his deep gratitude to her, pronouncing a blessing and wishing her only the best, as well as success in the noble and important work of the Holy Virgin. Moreover, Zirko will always be happy to help if needed, be it in managing Hisui or in any other situation where a lady may need support. Standing irritably to the side, the evil dragon noticed that he had heard their conversation perfectly well and was clearly not happy about it. Approaching his old friend, the man apologetically informed him that his former acquaintance had forgotten to take some important things with him, leaving them in his care. The hand, which was adorned with a black glove, held the mirror that the diplomat had previously given to the healer. Now the mirror was no longer necessary and remained only a reminder of the past. Lead muttered in surprise that they were not obligated to return the mirror at all, since the salamander himself had given it to them as a generous gift, and now it was no longer required to be returned. Hisui, without saying a word about returning, simply ordered the memory mirror to be returned back, demonstrating that the decision was final and not subject to discussion. On the way home, Jirko looked thoughtfully into the mirror, thinking that there should no longer be any traces of past memories left in his reflection. When the amulet was suddenly opened, a voice came out of it, talking about how terrible it was to perform in public, and there was also a note of disappointment in the voice, since they had invited a mermaid. In the reflection, one could see Malu, overcome with horror, asking Hisui what she should do, since she couldn't sing at all and was completely at a loss. Without looking away, the man watched the dragon's memory, in which his beloved was clearly visible, causing his heart to skip a beat with excitement and nostalgia. Jirko was beginning to think that this was another mockery from Hisui, but then Malu, blushing cutely from embarrassment, declared that she did not want to go to Led, fearing that he would find out about her ugly voice. The man froze in place as the scene where the mermaid, in a mesmerizing voice, ordered the dragon not to reveal a single word of their secret conversation to the salamander, resurfaced in his memories. The healer fought for the life of the boy she loved until her last breath. The maiden's body began to turn black and severe pain appeared, but Malu did not give up. However, the mermaid's soul will not disappear, but will be reborn in a new body. Even though she and Led were separated, their paths will cross again one day, and they will meet again. Until then, the healer wanted her beloved to not skimp on words of love, not close himself off from the world, and live a full life, experiencing all feelings and emotions. It was with Zirko that the lady spent her happiest and most joyful days, which she will never forget, remembering them as a time filled with smiles and laughter. The circle of aristocrats standing by the window loudly discussed the news that the dragon was still alive and well, which caused a wave of surprise and discussion among those present. The noble ladies, on the contrary, could not hide their delight and joy when they learned that they would be able to meet Mr. Hisui, who was incredibly handsome and courageous. The imperial palace was striking in its beauty and grandeur, proudly opening its doors to guests. It was surrounded by dazzling white walls and columns, and blue roofs flaunted on top. Ichiru and the dragon stood nearby, amazed by the indescribable beauty of the castle. The girl was wearing a cute dress, while the man was dressed in a suit worthy of an aristocrat. Finally dawned on Futaba that they had arrived at the palace, and her long-time dream, which had seemed almost unattainable, was about to come true. In that moment of realization, her heart filled with joy and excitement. At the entrance, they were met by a butler in an impeccably pressed suit, his gestures filled with refined respect. He politely greeted the couple and invited them inside. Inside the palace, strolling through a cozy gazebo located near picturesque green gardens, a woman with blonde hair, dressed in a magnificent outfit. Bowing politely before Her Majesty, Hisui greeted the lady, saying how much time had passed since their last meeting. His words were filled with respect for the royal person. Deciding to follow her companion's example, Ichiru also bowed in respect to the woman ruling the country and introduced herself by stating her name. The Empress, seeing her old acquaintance, extended her hand to him in a friendly manner and, calling him her sword, expressed her respect and gratitude. The Empress also treated Ichiru with great cordiality and warmth, deeply recognizing her outstanding abilities and significant achievements, and sincerely looked forward to her long-awaited visit. The three of them settled down comfortably at a snow-white tea table on the veranda and began to discuss the mysterious magic of the Holy Virgin, delving into fascinating details. The proud mistress of the lands began to list all the virtues of the lady who was able to improve Roslet, heal the animals from the sand and stop the rain, thereby saving many lives. Smiling and maintaining a calm dignity, Ichiru silently accepted all expressions of praise, modestly bowing his head. Smiling, the woman added that Hisui had grown up in the palace since childhood and was like a son to her, despite the fact that now there was nothing left of the peaceful boy. Now the ruler of the empire, with warmth in her voice and motherly care in her eyes, expressed her sincere desire for her pupil to simply live and enjoy every moment of his life, finding happiness and peace. She also added that as soon as Ichiru's results came in, she would immediately appoint her to the position of healer, recognizing the Holy Maiden's outstanding abilities. Moreover, in this country, monsters and ordinary people are equal, but magical creatures remain defenseless against the sand rain. Therefore, the Empress had a goal to change their fate and give them freedom. The night before the saint's departure from the estate fell, enveloping everything around in soft darkness and enchanting silence, and a feeling of anticipation and trepidation before the events to come hung in the air. In the silence that enveloped the room like a soft blanket, footsteps suddenly began to be heard, slowly and persistently disturbing the serene peace of the house. To the girl's surprise, she was not the only one suffering from excruciating insomnia at this late hour. Hisui stood near the window, bathed in soft moonlight, lost in his thoughts. Smiling with a warm light in her eyes, the healer offered to prepare a fragrant herbal tea that would not only help calm nervous tension, but would also have a relaxing effect. As unexpected as it was, the lady found herself in the tight grip of the dragon's arms, who gently embraced her, as if protecting her from the whole world, and conveyed his warmth and care to his beloved. He gently asked her to stay in this position a little longer, to enjoy that brief but priceless moment of closeness and comfort that this moment so generously gave them. Futaba could only nod in agreement, falling into a deep silence where embarrassment and shyness enveloped her, the words stuck in her throat, not wanting to come out. After this, the lady made a tender request to the dragon, asking him to discuss something important with her, since everything in their relationship seemed confusing and needed clarity. Smiling despite her unexpected association with the large reptile, the lady noted that she never doubted her faith in him and always remained confident in his kindness. Holding the saint tightly in his arms, the dragon tenderly and affectionately gave her a kiss that was full of sincere feelings. The imperial palace was in a state of turmoil, as the Empress's subjects prepared to conduct a thorough test of the Holy Maiden's magic to determine her true powers and intentions. The magic test will be carried out by a small dog in an exquisite and beautiful outfit. This is a creature that has incredible cuteness and fluffiness. Soon the dog confirmed that Ichiru indeed had a unique power and the ability to change the direction of sand rain, which was a real revelation for everyone present. Futaba beamed with pride and happiness. No one had ever met such a strong person in the field of magic like her before, and this realization filled the lady with incredible joy. The only thing they couldn't accurately determine was Ichiru's power level, as she simply smashed the magic inspection ball into pieces. As she muttered an apology, the lady felt her face flush with embarrassment. The dog hastened to reassure the healer, assuring her that everything was fine. The magic that the saint possessed was a divine gift, bestowed upon her by God himself. For Ichiru to discover that her blood undoubtedly contained a portion of the essence of magical creatures, thus adding an element of magic to life. Moreover, she also discovered that the attributes of holy magic were mainly possessed by the scaly monsters, which was quite unusual and unexpected, leaving her completely bewildered and surprised. Sitting on a bench in a garden where red roses were blooming, the girl told her little friend about what had happened. In response, he suggested that perhaps Ichiru was just a fish. According to the boy's logic, since creatures with scales possessed sacred magic, then the girl was probably a fish. With a smile, the wolf cub added that he himself could swim well. Not far from them was a picturesque pond, covered with water lilies and sparkling with clear water, to which Shitori headed, trying to observe the mysterious underwater inhabitants. The boy, rushing forward, did not notice how he ran into a tall stranger. The sudden blow made him stagger, and he, overcoming difficulties, barely stayed on his feet. This unusual person turned out to be a blond young man with bright blue eyes, who, without hiding his tears, looked like an elf with long and graceful ears, giving him incredible charm. The boy stared in surprise at the handsome guy who stood frozen in place, as if enchanted by his extraordinary appearance and grace. Noticing the wolf cub's prolonged absence, Ichiru, filled with deep excitement and anxiety, hurried to meet him, her heart filled with concern for his safety. The elf, with a gentle smile on his face and carefully wiping away his tears, said that it was not the girl's fault at all. There was sincere kindness and understanding in his voice. Futaba, deeply shocked by the unexpected meeting with the stranger, could not help but notice his unexpected and truly mesmerizing attractiveness. At the imperial palace, the aristocrats were stunned by the sudden appearance of the empire's sword, Hisui, at the meeting, causing many surprised and indignant reactions among those present. The empress, without wasting any time, decisively cut off all the shouts, confidently declaring that this man had personally mastered the magic of Ichiru and therefore had every right to be in the hall. The empress herself intended to send the Holy Virgin as a student to experienced healers who could teach her the ancient arts of healing and pass on valuable knowledge. The noble lady couldn't help but laugh when she learned from the report that Ichiru, having become so nervous during the inspection, accidentally healed the dog that was conducting the evaluation. One of the aristocrats, a distinguished middle-aged man with a distinctive mustache, raised his hand and, to attract attention, declared that he had an important and constructive opinion regarding the current situation. According to the report, it was found that the girl with magical powers used her skills exclusively to heal magical creatures and plants affected by the sand. However, in the opinion of the nobleman, the maiden could not become a healer, since it was unlikely that she was capable of healing people from serious wounds and injuries. The empress could not help but agree with this opinion, but noted that the holy maiden clearly possessed a unique gift that could save all magical creatures in their lands. In conclusion, the woman said that if creatures begin to recover faster, then the magical economy will rapidly develop upward, and this, in turn, will lead to an improvement in the situation for people. Hisui silently listened to the speech of the empress and the old aristocrat. They discussed that it was too early to draw conclusions about the girl's powers, since her abilities were clearly insufficient. Moreover, it was because of this terrible nobleman that Hisui began to be perceived as a monster, which only worsened the situation and added tension to the discussion. Another high society man also raised his hand and mumbled awkwardly that creating a special place to honor the Holy Virgin would also require a significant financial investment. And so, one by one, the nobles began to express their dissatisfaction, fearing that the costs of the girl would not justify themselves and would not bring the expected return on investment. The men suddenly froze and quickly fell silent as a menacing growl came from the nearby shadows, immediately catching their attention and causing a feeling of alarm. It turned out that it was Hisui, who, having lost patience with the arrogant egoists focused solely on their own profits and monetary gain, could not stand it and showed his irritation. The dragon declared that he would take on the responsibility of protecting Ichiru himself, willing to use all his strength and skills to ensure the girl's safety and well-being. A shudder ran through the bodies of the aristocrats, caused by the evil look and obvious threat that left no doubt about the intentions of their author, permeating the atmosphere with tension and fear. Hisui pointed out that magical creatures may begin to doubt if changes do not occur, as they have dedicated their lives to the empire but have not received the appropriate reward. The men, who found themselves in an extremely awkward position, could not understand what had caused the dragon, who had previously been completely indifferent to the fate of the country, to suddenly begin to show persistent anxiety and worry. Taking into account the opinion of the council and her old ward, the empress came to the conclusion that the saint should be given a probationary period, after which it would become clear whether his magic would be useful or not. According to the woman, the greatest evidence of the effectiveness and usefulness of her magical abilities will be the achieved results and successes that she can demonstrate. It would be extremely interesting to know if the saint would be able to win the support of the crown prince, that same blonde elf who possessed a majestic aura and mysterious appeal. Ichiru awkwardly watched the healer boy, who, without holding back his emotions, was covered in large tears, as if every glance brought him new grief or experience. Soon the guy left the room, leaving the girl alone, immersed in her thoughts and feelings. His departure further emphasized her loneliness and inner emptiness. Sitting in the hall, the lady discussed with the dragon what had happened at the meeting. The man told her that a period of 3 months had been set to test her magical powers. He also added that during this time she would receive both material and non-material support, which may prove necessary for the successful fulfillment of all the empire's requirements. Smiling, Ichiru accepted all the conditions, feeling that she had finally achieved her goal. The lady's heart was full of joy and satisfaction, knowing that her efforts had not been in vain. The dragon thought that in order to achieve complete success, They should also secure the support of an heir to strengthen their position and provide a solid foundation for future endeavors. Surprised, the girl froze at the mention of the heir. Her violet eyes widened in shock, and the saint had a hard time realizing that she had never heard of such a person's existence before. Quickly processing the information she had just heard, the girl came to the surprising conclusion that the prince in question was a healer just like herself. However, the prince's magical abilities were becoming weaker every day, and there were rumors that yesterday the boy was unable to use his power on his own, which made the situation even worse. Hisui rushed to explain that the prince was half human and that he might have been infected by the black sand that fell from him, which explained his depressed state and deterioration of abilities. Ichiru nodded knowingly, realizing that she had a chance to try to help the prince and cure him of the destructive effects of the black sand. Not only the boy's health, but the prosperity of the entire empire depended on it. The hedgehog who came to Ichiru introduced herself as a maid and said that her name was Hari Perk, adding that she would help the saint within these walls, offering all her strength and knowledge for the successful completion of the assigned tasks. The Holy Virgin joyfully asked the hedgehog to take care of her, to which she replied that today she would show her the palace and introduce her to its surroundings to help her adapt better. As the lady stepped out into the street with her maid, her gaze immediately fell upon the crowd of people gathered nearby, among whom she noticed several familiar faces. The dragon stood in the middle of the territory in a white shirt, confident in himself and his actions. His posture and calmness indicated his readiness to repel any threat. Now Hisui was going to become the healer's personal bodyguard, and so, while he had free time, he replaced the instructor at the Night Order's training, using his rich experience in combat to teach. A ceremony was to take place later, where the man would be knighted, which would be a major milestone in his career and recognition of his achievements and experience in martial arts. At that moment, the dragon, as if sensing Ichiru's presence, suddenly turned around and looked at her with a warm and sincere smile. The boy's expression conveyed joy and friendliness. The Holy Virgin felt her heart beat faster with excitement, and her face turned red like a ripe tomato, giving her image a tremulous and delicate shade filled with invisible magic and emotional depth. Futaba happily waved her hand in greeting to her lover, her face shining with genuine happiness and her eyes sparkling with true, deep affection. The confused dragon returned to training the knights, who were surprised by their commander's strange behavior, not knowing what exactly caused his awkwardness. Ichiru, dressed in a modest dress and accompanied by a hedgehog, strolled through the luxurious halls of the imperial palace, where maids walked back and forth, going about their business. Suddenly, two knights approached the lady, introducing themselves as sages who had joined the knightly order at the same time as Hisui, making their visit especially significant. One of the palace's defenders reported that they had heard rumors of a healer who had saved the lord, and this news was the focus of discussion among the guards. It may have seemed rude on their part, but the sages couldn't resist asking directly, and inquired whether the healer had met with Hisui, showing genuine interest in her interactions with the commander. Ichiru immediately felt deeply embarrassed by such a frank and unexpected question. Her face turned red, and awkwardness and confusion flashed in her eyes, causing her to be at a loss for a moment. The dragon was known for his hostility and cold gaze that pierced through and through. It was incredibly difficult to get close to him because his heart seemed to be made of ice. It was very different from that smiling captain, whose face lit up with joy and light every time he looked at his beloved, radiating such warmth and happiness, as if the whole world around became brighter and kinder. Under Ichiru's awkward gaze, the men were saddened by the fact that their colleague had become a real handsome man, although they thought that they themselves would be popular with women, and he would remain a bachelor. Futaba herself could not understand by what miracle she managed to melt the cold heart of a man who was known for his unapproachability. The holy maiden simply followed the call of her heart, hoping for the best. When asked if she was the dragon's lover, Futaba could not answer this question, since the girl herself did not know the exact answer, lost in her feelings and guesses. While the saint was getting used to the new place, a new day had arrived, and the aristocrats were leisurely strolling through the spacious halls, decorated with exquisite fabrics and sparkling crystal chandeliers. Dressed in a gorgeous pink formal dress, Ichiru stood awkwardly among the elegant ladies, lamenting the missed opportunity and regretting that she had never been able to talk to Hisui. In his fantasies, the orphan dragon reluctantly and bewilderedly refused her, assuring her that he could never even think of such a thing, so far from his ideas of peace and honor. If he answers like that, the girl's heart will be broken like fragile glass falling on a stone floor. Trying to calm herself down, Futaba mused that perhaps this level of affection between friends really was normal among dragons. The lady's fingers clenched nervously, reflecting the girl's desire to become noticeable and important to Hisui, trying to attract his attention and arouse his interest. Suddenly a loud voice called out, calling the great lord to come forward, followed by powerful, echoing footsteps, filling the air with tense anticipation. And then Hisui entered the hall, dressed in the ceremonial uniform of the imperial court, reminiscent of a magnificent prince from fairy tales, captivating everyone with his regal grandeur and grace. In person, he was far more handsome than the healer could have imagined in her wildest fantasies. His aristocratic appearance, combining refined elegance and impeccable style, seemed almost unreal. The man knelt before the Empress and, listening to her regal gaze, began to pronounce the oath of allegiance in a firm voice. He swore by his honor, faith, and truth to serve the empire, promising to give his life for its prosperity and protection, sparing neither strength nor energy for the well-being of the country.